3 days passed since we took Black Pine Town. This morning I stood on the castle tower and watched my soldiers train below. Over 300 guards were drilling in the square, practicing spear formations under Bear 1, Bear 2, and Bear 3's command. 3 days ago, these people were starving slaves with dead eyes. Now they stood tall, and their eyes had life in them. The human Emperor Banner's power and good food were making them stronger every day. They weren't elite soldiers yet, but they could fight. Bear 4 ran up to me, excited. The magic wolf had given birth, 6 pups. I had dairy animals ready to nurse them, so that was good. I went down to the stable to see for myself. The wolf was lying in the back stall, barely alive. She was twice the size of a normal wolf, covered in blood and filth, her legs twisted and broken. She glared at me with pure hatred while her pups nuzzled against her. I told her the truth. Her wounds were too bad, and I couldn't heal her. She was going to die, but her children would serve me. She tried to lunge at me, but her broken legs gave out, and she collapsed. I drew my sword, channeled my battle energy, and drove the blade through her skull. She went still. The pups didn't even understand what happened. They kept pushing into their dead mother's body. I had Bear 4 and the guards take them away to be raised. Then I used my soul banner on the wolf's corpse. Blue light pulled her spirit out, and I refined it into a soul bead that merged into the banner. Another one added to my collection. After that, I checked on supplies with Bear 4. We were short on iron, only enough for about 300 spears for the main fighters. His support team had half spears and half wooden ones, though the charred wooden spears worked well enough. No time to wait for more iron. I told him to inform Bear 1 and the others. We march at dawn tomorrow. I watched my new soldiers train in the square and thought about my situation. A 13-year-old kid commanding hundreds of grown men. How? In this world, power comes from control. The nobles keep their slaves through fear and violence, generation after generation. I just use a different method, the soul blood bond. More complete, more reliable. Without it, these people would sell me out by tomorrow. Personal charm and big dreams mean nothing here. Strength is justice. That's how this world works. I figured the orcs from Creek Valley had already sent out their 500 warriors. Tomorrow I'd lead 300 against 500. Even if we won, it would be ugly. I walked over to the carpenter's shop. Inside, 2 carpenters and their helpers were working hard. They all dropped to their knees the moment they saw me. I looked at what they'd built, cart-mounted crossbows. Each one was a wooden frame on an ox cart with bows strapped to it, 2 facing forward and 1 facing back. The carpenter, Mill, was terrified. The things were rough, pine wood, scavenged hunting bows, makeshift bowstrings. He begged for mercy, saying they didn't have enough materials or time. I didn't care about excuses. I asked about the power. He said they could punch through an earth wall at 100 meters, but the accuracy was bad, and at longer range the bowstrings or handles kept snapping. I told him to fix what he could. I gave him all the ox sinew we had for the strings. I told him accuracy was just a matter of tuning, like adjusting a hunting bow. As for range, better materials would come later. For now, work with what we have. He's a carpenter. He should know how to figure it out. They'd only managed to build 3 of these cart crossbows from all the bows they could find. 3 was enough. I ordered Mill to operate them himself in tomorrow's battle and trained 20 men to use them too. He was scared but agreed, and even got excited, saying once we had better materials he could build much stronger ones. I walked back outside. Out on the Hope Plains, a big war between humans and orcs was about to break out. Baron Black Mountain was trapped in his castle, close to falling. And all I had were a few hundred half-trained soldiers and 3 crude cart crossbows. But I was out of time. If the Baron died, the orcs would turn their full force on me. I had to take Creek Valley before they could regroup. No room for mercy when you lead soldiers. Time waits for no one. At dawn, my soldiers were already eating around the iron pots. I checked my intelligence reports while they ate. 3 pieces of news came in. First, Baron Black Mountain's water was almost gone. He planned to break out tonight and flee over the mountains to count Red Maple's territory. Second, on the Hope Plains, the northern nobles were pinned down in 2 cities by the orcs. Grand Duke Steinine appointed Sigmund as commander, and he planned to send Griffin riders to freeze the North Wind Fortress Pass with ice magic scrolls, cutting off orc reinforcements. Third, and most important to me, the orcs from Creek Valley sent 100 warriors to the hill pasture to search for their 3 missing tribesmen. They'd arrive around 11 in the morning. I smiled. They split their forces again. Perfect. We'd get there first and ambush them. I gathered Bear 1 through Bear 4 and drew a map on the ground with a stick, the pasture layout, the stream, the stables, the warehouse. The plan was simple. Hide behind the hills, let the orcs walk into the pasture, then surround them. 3 cart crossbows aimed at their approach. Fire first to break their formation, then push in with spear formations. Bear 3 and I would flank and cut off their retreat. We marched out, over 400 soldiers, silent and steady. The pasture was bare. All the grass had been harvested, just empty ground. Bear 1 worried there was nowhere to hide. I told them to cover the cart crossbows with hay from the warehouse and position everyone behind the hills. The scouts came running back fast. The orcs were coming. My soldiers poured out and formed up behind the hills. The cart crossbows were pushed to the front, aimed at the gap in the hills. When the orcs came over the hill and saw us, they froze. Then one of them shouted that we must be the escaped slaves who killed their tribesmen. Before their leader could even give orders, several orcs charged at us screaming. I waited calmly. When they bunched up close enough, I gave the order. 3 crossbow bolts flew out and tore through the front runners, punching through multiple bodies. 1 orc got pinned to the ground through the chest. Another lost an arm. A third tumbled and never got up. Then I called for the spear wall. For formations locked into position. Front row kneeling with spears angled forward. Back rows standing with spears layered over their shoulders. Like a giant hedgehog made of iron points. The orcs crashed into the wall and got skewered. They tried smashing the spears with their clubs, but break 1 and 10 more came at you. Another volley from the crossbows dropped even more. I ordered the formations to push forward. The orcs couldn't fight back against this. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was a slaughter. Someone yelled, "Run," and the rest of them broke and fled. I rode out on my horse, cut through their flank, and started cutting them down. Bear 1 and the others followed. Half an hour later, the field was covered in bodies. I raised my sword and pointed east. For victory, forward, my soldiers cheered. Bear 4's team stripped the bodies of anything useful. Then I pulled out my soul banner and drained every orc corpse. Over 100 souls poured in, feeding the soul bead and expanding its power. By nightfall, we reached Creek Valley Castle. It sat on high ground west of a winding stream, with a small town across a stone bridge on the east side. Orcs were sitting around bonfires at the gate and on the bridge. Bear 1 and Bear 2 scouted, but couldn't tell how many orcs were inside. I told everyone to rest. We'd act in the second half of the night. I sent people to watch and find where the human slaves were kept. Rescuing our people came first. Bear 1 woke me up in the dark. He and Bear 2 had swum downstream to scout the town. Every house they checked was full of orcs. The castle gate was shut with torches on the walls. They couldn't get close. 2 hours until dawn. The stream was knee-deep where they crossed, and the water was freezing. Any orc trying to wade through without battle energy would be half dead before reaching the other side. Good. I checked my intelligence reports. 4 updates came in. The orcs didn't like sleeping in the stone castle. They'd all moved into the wooden houses in town instead. All the human slaves, nearly 1,000, were locked inside the castle with only 6 orcs guarding the gate in shifts. The orcs kept their stolen cattle and sheep in Grey Rock Valley to the east, guarded by 10 orcs with 20 human slaves doing the herding. Deep inside that valley, there was an underground river where 6 magical stream turtles lived. 1 late first rank, 1 mid first rank, and 4 early first rank. And the former Baron's treasure room had 50 low-grade healing potions, 2,000 gold coins, and an exploration journal. I smiled and drew a plan on the ground. Bear 3 would take men to Grey Rock Valley, kill the orc guards, secure the livestock, and hurry back. Bear 2 would take 100 men to guard the shallow points along the stream so no orcs could escape across the water. Bear 1 would hold the stone bridge with 100 men and all 3 cart crossbows. His only job was to keep the orcs trapped in town. I'd take the castle myself with Bear 4. Once we controlled the slaves inside, we'd send half to help Bear 3 on defense. We crept forward along the stream in the dark. The water noise covered our footsteps. Then an orc in town woke up, looked out a window, and saw the massive figures across the water. Enemy attack. I kicked my horse and charged for the stone bridge. My sword was glowing blue with battle energy. The 4 orcs guarding the bridge barely stood up before I cut through all of them in one sweep, split clean in half. I rode straight for the castle gate. I leaped off my horse, pushed off the wall, and vaulted over the battlements. The orc on the wall didn't even see me clearly before his head went flying. I dropped into the gate passage and cut down 4 more orcs in seconds. One split down the middle along with his spiked club, one slashed open across the chest, one run through. I kicked the last body aside, ripped out the door bar, and threw the gate open. My soldiers rushed in and speared the last 2 orcs as they stumbled out of their quarters. I sheathed my sword and looked at the human slaves huddled in every corner of the castle. I told Bear 4 to cook food for them, a full meal first. Then pick out the strong ones and add them to our guard force. The castle came alive with activity. I stood at the gate and watched the sky brighten to the east. On the stone bridge, Bear 1 had his 100 men in formation with the 3 cart crossbows aimed at the town. Across the water, the orcs in town were gathering. I could hear their roaring and the clashing of weapons through the morning fog. Countless dark shapes were moving in the streets. As dawn broke, the orcs on the other side of the bridge got restless. They expected us to attack during the night, but we just held our ground. Finally, about 400 of them charged the stone bridge. Bear 1 ordered the cart crossbows to fire. The bolts ripped through the front runners, punching clean through bodies and knocking others down. But the orcs kept coming, climbing over their dead. The spear wall met them, 3 rows of spears thrusting in rhythm, one group after another. The bridge was narrow, so no matter how many orcs there were, they could only come a few at a time. Bodies piled up fast. Blood ran off the bridge and turned the stream dark red. They pulled back and started throwing rocks and wood at us. Some even tore boards off houses. A dozen of my soldiers went down. The orcs charged again. I rode to the bridge myself. A rock flew at my face. I split it with my sword. I moved the cart crossbows to the sides to hit the orcs from new angles. Then I pulled out my soul banner and drained all the corpses piled on the bridge. The bodies collapsed into nothing, and the orcs climbing over them fell in a heap. I jumped off my horse and went in on foot. I cut through them, 3 heads in one swing, split one in half, took another's arm off at the shoulder. The orcs saw my battle energy glowing blue on the blade and knew what it meant. Bronze Knight level at least. One young orc charged me screaming. I stepped aside and cut him from shoulder to hip, clean in 2. I pointed my sword at the remaining orcs. Submit or die. One weapon hit the ground. Then another. Then they all started dropping. One orc knelt. Then they all knelt. Over 1,000 of them, like dominoes falling. Bear 1's men crossed the bridge and tied up the males. Nobody resisted. Final count, 1,230 captured. Mostly old ones, women, and children. Less than 100 fighters left. I ordered them locked up and starved for a day. Then I rode to Grey Rock Valley. Bear 3 was stuck at the narrow entrance. The orcs up on the cliffs were dropping rocks and shooting arrows down. My men had tried several times and lost over a dozen wounded. I took out my longbow and charged it with battle energy. The first arrow punched through the wooden wall at the top and went straight through an orc's gut. The second arrow hit a support pillar. The whole barricade collapsed on top of the defenders. The orcs panicked, and then the human slaves up there made their move. A middle-aged man grabbed a wooden spear and drove it through the nearest orc's throat. The other slaves attacked with rocks and sticks. Bear 3's men stormed in and finished the rest. Only a few slaves survived the fight. I asked them about the underground river in the valley. One man said he used to be the one who caught the stream turtles. The good ones came from a hidden cave deep inside the valley, not the ones raised outside for show. I sent Bear 3 back with a load of sheep, skins to be processed, meat for the soldiers. Then I put the turtle keeper on my horse and rode deep into the valley. The path got narrower and darker until even the horse couldn't fit. I tied it up and walked the rest on foot with my sword. After about 15 minutes, the path opened into a natural stone cavern with a high ceiling. A pool of clear green water sat in the middle, perfectly still. I smiled. This was the place. I asked the turtle keeper about the stream turtles. He said the ones they caught were always ordinary, face basin sized at most. The real big ones hid deep in the underground river and never came up. He showed me a small pit they'd dug near the main pool, a trap like catching wolves. They'd put meat in, wait a few days, and turtles would crawl in to feed. He even fished out a small one to show me. I tossed it back into the water. Bubbles started rising from below. The man reached in again, and a massive turtle head shot out and bit down on his hand. Crushed it. The thing was over 2 meters across. A magic beast for certain. I jumped off the wall, flipped upside down in midair, and drove my sword through the turtle's neck. Head came right off. I used my soul banner to drain its spirit into a soul bead. The shell had a metallic ring to it when I flicked it. Interesting material. I sent it into my soul weapon space to be refined. The turtle keeper was still thrashing in the water with his hand bitten off. I looked at him for a moment, sighed, and left. I rode back to the pass and told some soldiers to bring slaughtered sheep to the cave and leave them by the water pit as bait for the remaining turtles. Snow started falling as I rode back to the castle. Heavy snow, covering everything white. Wartime and winter, people would freeze and starve. Back at the castle, I got the numbers. 765 humans fit to fight. The rest were women and children. The old and weak were all dead already. I ordered meat cooked and had them brought in groups to the training yard to give their soul blood, a lock of hair, and a drop of blood from each. For the captured orcs, I ordered all males taller than Bear 1 to be drafted. The females could stay and look after the young ones. Bear 1 hesitated. They were orcs, after all. I told them I didn't care. If they fight for me and charge walls for me, they deserve to eat. He accepted. I found the Baron's secret room behind the bookshelf in his study. A hidden switch in the wall opened it. Inside were iron chests containing the Stream Valley Exploration Journal with maps of the terrain, resources, and mineral locations. There were basic weapon technique scrolls for sword, blade, and spear, 50 bottles of low-grade healing potions, and piles of gold coins. I stored everything in my soul weapon space. Bear 1 rounded up the orc recruits from the town. He found 2 orc brothers clinging to each other, the older one tall enough to qualify, the younger one too small, only 8 years old. The older brother begged them to take him and leave the little one. Bear 1 offered the deal: swear loyalty, get meat. The little one tugged his brother's sleeve and said he wanted meat. The older brother looked at his people huddled in the corners, old, young, mothers with babies, and agreed. At evening, I stood on the castle wall and looked down at 2 groups kneeling below, the new human soldiers and the orc recruits. I told them I didn't care who they used to be or who they served before. From today, they were my people. Fight for me, and I'd feed them and clothe them. I held up my soul banner and let them see the water snake moving on its surface, its cold eyes watching every one of them. Their lives belonged to me now. Betray me, and their souls would be destroyed. They knelt in the snow and swore the oath: life, soul, body, all mine. When they finished, I released the suppression on the soul banner's feedback. Over 1,000 tiny lights drifted out like fireflies in the snowstorm and sank into each person's forehead. The ones with talent felt warmth flooding through their bodies right away. Even the weaker ones felt stronger and could breathe easier. Then Bear 4 brought out pots of lamb stew and black bread. Meat until they were full. The crowd cheered and scrambled into lines. I asked Bear 1 about military structure in the duchy. He said Grand Duke Steinein's army used hundreds, then thousands, 5,000 to a legion, but it was messy and inconsistent. Bear 4 reported that 59 of our men had already reached trainee knight level, with another 100 expected soon. At this rate, the whole force could eventually reach that level. Bear 3 found 25 warhorses in Grey Rock Valley. I made my decisions. 12 of the best fighters would become my knight escorts, each with a horse. The 4 bears would each get 2 horses. 3 spares went to logistics. I named our banner the Morning Star and our force the Morning Star Legion. For structure, 5 men per squad, 5 squads per platoon, 5 platoons per company, 5 companies per battalion, 5 battalions per regiment. All the trainee knights would be assigned as squad leaders, platoon leaders, and company leaders based on strength. I told the 4 bears plainly, their potential was used up. They'd never get past Black Iron rank, but they should still live well. I appointed Bear 1 and Bear 2 as battalion commanders. Bear 4 got logistics. Gather every craftsman, blacksmith, carpenter, leatherworker, and tailor, and get weapons and armor ready before the cold killed us. Bear 3 would command the reserve battalion and train all new recruits. Then I gave Bear 2 a reward. He'd reached the peak of trainee knight, so I tossed him a battle energy awakening potion. He drank it right there. The heat exploded inside him, and he started working through basic combat forms, slow and heavy, guiding the energy through his body. When it condensed and settled, he dropped to his knees with tears in his voice. He was a Black Iron Knight now. I told him to spread the basic combat techniques to everyone starting at dawn. That night, something burst through the frozen stream outside the castle. A column of water smashed through the ice and rose half a meter before falling back. I glanced at it, then looked north and went inside. Next morning, the snow had stopped. Everyone was busy, sweeping snow, cooking, training. I checked my intelligence reports. The Griffin squad sent by Commander Sigmund had used ice magic scrolls to freeze the Northwind fortress. But the orcs spotted them. One Griffin was hit by arrows and crashed into the stream about 5 miles north of our castle. The rider and Griffin were both dead. The ice seal triggered an elemental chain reaction, pulling cold energy toward the fortress and dropping temperatures around it. Once it stabilized, temperatures would recover. The ice couldn't be broken by force without risking elemental backlash. Baron Black Mountain had escaped with his escorts and eldest son into the Black Mountain range. He had a secret weapons cache hidden in a valley north of his castle. 20 sets of knight armor, 200 swords, 300 spears, 100 longbows, and plenty of arrows. Only he and a few trusted men knew the location. And in the Gray Rock Valley cave, 3 early first-rank stream turtles had crawled out of the underground river, drawn by the sheep carcasses I'd left as bait. They were resting by the pool after eating. I smiled. I sat in the great hall eating porridge and thinking. I sent Bear 1 north along the stream with an orc squad to recover the fallen Griffin rider's body and equipment. Then I started worrying. Baron Black Mountain had escaped, so the 1,000-plus elite orcs besieging his castle had no target now. What would they do? Raid and plunder, then head south to the Hope Plains or west toward us. Either way, Creek Valley was too close, and the Northwind Fortress was frozen shut, meaning the orcs in Northwind City would leave too. If any of them sent messengers this way, they'd discover both Black Pine and Creek Valley had changed hands. I only had about 1,000 soldiers. Fighting regular orcs was hard enough. Running into elites would be a disaster. I ordered the garrison at Black Pine Fort to relocate to Creek Valley Castle immediately. Bear 4 rushed in with bad news. Last night, the soldiers and orc troops ate nearly 1,000 sheep. We had about 10,000 sheep and 200 cattle left in Gray Rock Valley. At this rate, we'd run out in half a month. I told him combat troops get fed first. Building fighting strength matters more. I heard hammering from the blacksmith shop. They'd found over 2,000 gene of iron in the backyard. I told him to forge spears first, then knights' swords for the trainee knights if there was iron left over. Then I pushed him harder. The cart crossbows had proven their worth. Why wasn't he already building more? And shields, bows, armor. Don't wait for me to tell you everything. You're the logistics commander, not a messenger boy. Think ahead and solve problems yourself. He apologized and ran off. I sighed, still short on capable people. I rode to Gray Rock Valley and took Bear 3 with 20 sheep deep into the canyon, back to the cave. 3 early first-rank stream turtles were resting by the rock wall near the pool, drawn out by the bait I'd left yesterday. I had Bear 3 drive the sheep inside. The turtles barely reacted until one sheep wandered too close. A turtle snapped its jaws on the sheep's leg like an iron clamp. I moved instantly, sword charged with battle energy. I flipped over the turtle and took its head off before it knew what happened. I landed on the second turtle's back, drove my sword down through its skull. The third one charged Bear 3's men and snapped their wooden spears like twigs, knocking soldiers flying. I finished my second turtle. Its shell was incredibly hard, so I had to find the gap where the head met the shell and stabbed through. I cut off its right legs, and when its head stretched out in pain, I took that off too. Bear 3 and his men flipped the last turtle onto its back with their spears. Its legs kicked wildly in the air. One swing of my sword, and its head rolled free, spraying blood all over the soldiers. I pulled out my soul banner and drained all 3 at once. 3 blue beams, 3 spirits pulled in, 3 soul beads forged and absorbed. I collected the 3 shells into my soul weapon space for refinement. I told the men to eat the leftover turtle meat. Magic beast flesh would help them break through to the next level faster. They were grateful. I told Bear 3 to keep feeding a sheep into the cave each month. 2 stronger turtles were still hiding deep in the underground river. They'd come out eventually. Back at the castle, Bear 1 had completed his mission. A huge griffin lay in the courtyard, 3 meters long, lion's body, eagle's head and wings. Beside it was the dead knight's gear, armor, a knight's longsword, a longbow, arrows, and a coin purse. I drew the sword halfway, fine steel with intricate patterns. Good quality. I gave the full set to Bear 1. He was grateful. I tried using the soul banner on the knight's body, but no soul came out. He'd died the night before. Too long ago, the soul had already scattered. I told them to bury him properly. He was a knight, after all. Then I cut off the griffin's talons and beak with my sword. Even without knowing its rank, those parts would be useful materials. I stored them in my soul weapon space and told Bear 1 to distribute the griffin meat among the troops. Magic beast flesh would strengthen them. Upstairs, I opened the Stream Valley Exploration Journal from the Baron's secret room. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a record of local products. It was a detailed atlas, page after page of terrain maps showing mountains, rivers, canyons, and passes. I realized we were all sitting at the foot of the Black Mountain Range. The mountains formed a wall across the north. Beyond them was Orc territory. South was human land. Several ridges cut the northern part of the duchy into narrow valleys. Black Pine, Creek Valley, and Black Mountain territories were all in the westernmost valley near the sea. Two natural corridors were guarded by fortresses belonging to Viscount Northwind and Count Red Maple. That explained everything. The Orcs only had two routes south, through Northwind Fortress or around through Red Maple's territory. The Baron had hidden a strategic military map inside a boring-sounding journal. Clever man. I was thinking about next steps when a guard came running. The 4 battalion commanders had selected 12 young men for my night escort and were waiting in the Great Hall. The boys lined up, the oldest around 15 or 16, the youngest 12 or 13. None of them could ride a horse yet. I told the bears to start training them. Once we had more horses, we'd need cavalry. The boys knelt and swore the oath, voices shaking but sincere. Life and soul, absolute obedience, fight my enemies, never betray. I told Bear 1 to teach them proper conduct tonight and start riding lessons tomorrow. How far they'd go was up to them. The battlefield would shape them. After everyone left, I sat alone in the empty hall listening to the fire crackle. I thought about the servant women back at Black Pine Castle. Where were they now? Escaped? Dead? Enslaved again? Probably dead. I shook my head, looked at the Morning Star banner flapping on the castle wall, and went to bed. I woke to dripping sounds. Snow was melting off the rooftops. Yesterday was a blizzard. Today, it was suddenly warm. The weather made no sense. I checked the new intelligence. Baron Black Mountain tried crossing the mountains, but the snow was too heavy. People kept falling to their deaths, so he gave up and secretly turned back. The orcs that attacked Black Mountain found nothing worth taking and couldn't cross the snowy mountains either. Their captain decided to abandon the area and march back to Creek Valley Castle. They'd arrive around noon today. In the north, the Orc Great Shaman tried to break the ice seal on Northwind Fortress and got frozen solid, shattered to pieces. The remaining shamans decided to head east across the Rift Wind Canyon to find their main army. They left 100 orcs behind to guard the human slaves in Northwind City, with orders not to leave until the slaves were all dead. Meanwhile, Commander Sigmund heard the fortress was frozen and the orcs were cut off. He ordered a full push forward and told the northern nobles to advance and retake their lands. Everything was connected. One frozen fortress changed the whole war. I made my move. The orcs had fled Northwind City, leaving slaves behind. Free soldiers waiting to be recruited. I called Bear 1 and Bear 2 and gave orders. Bear 2 would take a company of orc soldiers and his entire 2nd Battalion to Northwind City immediately. Only 100 orcs guarding it. Send the orc troops in first to blend in, then strike from inside and outside at the same time. Take the city by nightfall. Bear 1 would stay and handle the orcs returning from Black Mountain. They'd arrive today. He'd use the 1st Battalion as backup and put the orc soldiers on the front line. Time for them to prove their loyalty. Bear 3 would take over teaching the young escorts how to ride. After they left, I sat in the hall thinking. The battlefield was getting bigger, great shamans, magic scrolls, silver rank, orc commanders. My blue battle energy looked impressive to ordinary people, but on the real stage, it was nothing special. I needed more strength. I looked through the 3 weapon technique scrolls. The sword manual was identical to what I already knew. The blade manual was basically the same thing with a different weapon. I put both aside. The spear manual caught my attention. Only 3 moves: block, grab, thrust. block to deflect weapons left and right, grab to catch the enemy's weapon and counter, thrust to stab straight forward. 3 moves in a cycle, offense and defense together. Simple to learn, hard to master, but perfect for soldiers with no training. On a real battlefield where everyone is packed tight, fancy sword work is useless. A long spear that can block, deflect, and stab is all you need. I sent the spear manual to Bear 3 with orders to teach it to the entire army. At North Wind City, the orc shamans took one last look at the city they'd captured, then marched east with the main force to find their army leader Kagal. They left behind 100 orcs to guard over 10,000 human slaves. Their thinking was simple: let winter kill the weak ones. Whoever survived deserved to be a slave. Meanwhile, the orcs returning from Black Mountain were stumbling through the mountains, exhausted and stretched out for miles. My orc soldiers were waiting for them on the road, lined up neatly like welcoming kinsmen. The orc captain walked right up, happy to see friendly faces. He threw his arm around our orc squad leader's shoulder, even commented on how much healthier he looked. He explained that the campaign had been a disaster. Slaves died climbing mountains, then the blizzard killed more, then mudslides on the way back. He wasn't even sure how many were still behind him. Then he noticed the human soldiers standing behind his kinsmen, holding spears. Before he could react, a whistle blew. The spears came down and thrust into the orc column from both sides. The orc squad leader drove a short knife into the captain's gut. The captain died staring at the cold eyes of the tribesmen who'd just been calling him brother. Bear 1's forces crushed them quickly. These orcs were starved, exhausted, and could barely hold their weapons. The orc recruits charged in from the flanks with knives and clubs, cutting down their own kind without hesitation. One orc had climbed a tree to rest earlier and woke up to see the slaughter. It hid until nightfall, then slipped away into the mountains. Bear 1 came back proud, reporting no survivors. I asked him if he was sure. Orcs are scattered and sloppy, especially after a long march. Not all of them would have been together. His smile froze. I told him to station an orc company at the ambush site. Any stragglers that came out of the mountains should be led away and quietly dealt with. Tomorrow, build a small fort to block the road. No need to send people into the mountains searching. In this weather, the stragglers would die on their own eventually. We'd clean up next year if needed. Then I called Bear 3. His reserve battalion only had about 100 real fighters, plus some older folk and strong women who helped with the cart crossbows and cooking. The main battalions weren't at full strength either, around 400 each. I told him to fill the ranks, load up the cart crossbows and food supplies, and march with me to North Wind City. The 12 young escorts would come along too. I watched them scramble around trying to get ready. Clumsy kids. I was doing better than that when I was 12. I climbed onto my horse. Move out. We marched north. 300 soldiers, 10 cart crossbows, and 20 wagons of grain, crawling through muddy roads. I rode ahead with my 12 escorts. After about 10 miles, I looked back and couldn't even see the grain wagons anymore. I rode back and found women and old folk struggling to push a stuck cart through the mud. Then a wagon axle snapped behind us. The cart tipped and grain bags tumbled into the mud. The woman driving it dropped to her knees begging forgiveness. I walked over and stored every sack of grain from all 20 wagons into my sole weapon space. Problem solved. We moved much faster after that. By dusk, I could see North Wind City on the horizon. Red flags on the walls, screaming and fighting still going on inside, black smoke rising. I told the escorts to push harder, and we galloped in. The guards at the gate saw the Morning Star banner and let us through. I climbed the city wall and looked down. Bear 2 came running and knelt behind me. He'd killed 86 orcs so far, with a few still being hunted. Good. Then the bad news. I asked about food. Bear 2's voice went bitter. The granary was burned. Viscount Northwind had torched it before fleeing. Burned the grain stores, smashed the mills, even filled in the wells. The enslaved people had been dying of cold and hunger. They ate tree bark, grass roots, boot leather, anything. And the orcs had started eating people. They found the evidence in the cellars. No food left at all. Nothing. I pulled 1,000 gene of grain out of my sole weapon space and stacked the bags on the ground. I told Bear 2 to cook porridge and count heads. He shouted for men to haul grain and light fires. Big pots went up along the base of the wall. The smell of porridge drifted through the city, and starving people dragged themselves into crooked lines. I stood on the wall and did the math. 20 wagons was 10,000 jin. One meal of thin porridge a day for 10,000 people. That was 10 days. Creek Valley Castle still had tens of thousands of jin plus the livestock in Grey Rock Valley. Stretched thin, maybe a month. After that, nothing. I'd emptied Black Pine Castle's stores. Creek Valley was running low, and now I had over 10,000 more mouths in Northwind City. Food. That was what I needed most. I'd taken the cities, freed the slaves, beaten the orcs. But keeping all these people alive, that was the real problem. I stood on the wall all night thinking about the food problem. In the morning, I pushed open the window and saw it. The frozen Northwind Fortress. A wall of ice dozens of meters high, stretching across the mountains, sealing everything shut. Magic was truly terrifying. My intelligence reports brought good news for once. The shipwright Glan and his sailors had been fishing in the waters I'd ordered them to work. They'd hit a migrating school of fish, thousands of jin per net. They'd already dried tens of thousands of jin of fish. He'd also found a sheltered harbor north of coastal camp, near the Black Mountain Range. Deep water, calm waves, surrounded by mountains on 3 sides. The orc great shaman's staff had shattered during the ice backlash that killed him. A small piece of the shaft and a metal ring survived the destruction. And Edwin, the Silver Moon Trading Company manager, couldn't find news of me on the Hope Plains, so he decided to try reaching coastal camp by sea. Fish. Fish was food too. That could save us. About 8,000 people came for porridge that morning, mostly able-bodied workers. The old, the weak, women, children, barely any left. I sent Bear 2 east with orc troops, 2 guard companies, and 2,000 laborers to build a fortress at Riftwind Canyon. That would seal our eastern border and let us develop in peace. If he had strength to spare, he could try taking the far side of the canyon too. Bear 3 still hadn't arrived with his column. I sent a rider south to check on him, then left 6 escorts behind to help manage Northwind City's 8,000 people. I rode north to the frozen fortress myself. In front of the ice wall, I found blue debris scattered in the snow, the remains of the shaman's staff. Most of it crumbled to powder when I touched it. I recovered 2 things, a finger-length piece of wood with a spark of life energy inside, and a dull metal ring. The wood responded to battle energy. The ring didn't respond to battle energy, but when I pushed spirit power into it, I found a tiny storage space inside, crammed with small books and magic cores. I took everything out, then sent the wood and ring into my soul weapons refining layer. Then I rode southwest for over 4 hours straight to coastal camp. The 2 men I'd left guarding it spotted my Morningstar banner and came running, laughing and crying. My father had posted them there, so I could signal the fishing boat when I returned. They had a system. Shipwright Glan passed by twice daily, and if they waved a red flag from the beach, he'd come to shore. I told them to raise the flag. I stood on the beach and watched the sea. A black dot appeared on the sea and grew into a sailboat. Shipwright Glan spotted the red flag on the beach and brought the ship in. He knelt when he saw me and started rambling about everything back on the island. My father walking around checking on things, my mother making me clothes. For the cold, the eagle chicks fully feathered now, with Bear 5 watching them like a devoted parent. I told him to sail north along the coast first. I wanted to see the harbor he'd found. But after he said it was over 100 miles from the island, a full day's round trip, I decided to just head back and go tomorrow. I named our island Coiling Dragon Mountain, since the Iron Dragon's remains had fallen there, and it was where I started everything. Back on the island, my father was relieved to see me. My mother cried and scolded me for being gone so long. I told her I'd been fighting orcs, not playing around. She wasn't impressed. I slept deeply that night. In the morning, 4 intelligence updates came in. Bear 3 had reached Northwind City and was cleaning up the ruins and burying the dead. Bear 2 had pulled off another bold move. He used the orc soldiers to bluff his way into Riftwind Fortress on the eastern side of the canyon, capturing it in a surprise attack. He was now building a second fort on the western side to completely seal the passage. My soul weapon was absorbing something called Void Bright Stone powder from the metal ring, and in 3 days the storage space would expand several times over and develop a small living space inside. And Edwin the merchant had sold all his goods to northern nobles and was heading back to report to Lady Alina. My mother brought me porridge. Glenn had been waiting since dawn, but was too afraid to wake me. I reminded my mother that these people were my slaves. Glenn knew what would happen if he left without me. She worried about having only one ship. I told her I'd buy more soon. She asked about my older brother Jolin. I told her he was with Baron Blackpine near Hope City on the plains, about 400 miles south. They'd be pushing back this way eventually. I sailed out with Glan. During the 4-hour trip, I read one of the small books from the shaman's storage ring. It was an orc shaman training manual. Pictures showing how young orcs would drink different liquids to test their elemental affinity. The ones with the strongest connection would be selected and trained to gain supernatural power. Shamans weren't born, they were chosen from thousands. We reached the harbor. The moment we entered, the waves disappeared completely. The bay was like a round mirror with a handle. But the shape was wrong. It didn't look like natural erosion. It looked like something enormous had pressed into the earth, pushing up the hills on both sides. I climbed the eastern hill and looked out over endless forest. I checked the Baron's map journal and found small farming settlements dotted along the mountain base nearby, the closest one less than 20 miles from the bay. Over 100 years, settlers had cleared about 50 miles of forest toward this coast, but then stopped. Why? I stood there thinking for a long time, then went back to the ship and headed home. On the way back, I kept thinking about that harbor. The map showed farming settlements stretching from North Wind City westward, almost reaching the bay. Others had clearly tried to develop a sea route there, probably because land transport tolls were too expensive. The bay's strange shape bothered me, but I decided not to let fear hold me back. As long as whatever caused it didn't threaten me, it didn't matter. Next morning, I went to the island's storehouse and took 100,000 gene of dried fish into my soul weapon space. Then I sailed to coastal camp and rode hard to Northwind City. Bear 3 was panicking. He'd calculated they had 3 days of grain left. 6,000 people eating 2 liang each per day burned through over 1,000 gene daily. When he saw me, he nearly cried. I told him to pull himself together. I asked if fish counted as food. He was confused for a second, then his eyes went wide. I told him I'd give him all 100,000 gene. But first, pick out 1,500 strong men for me. I was expanding the army. Tomorrow I'd take them into the forest to forage for more food. We went to the central square. I waved my hand, and 100,000 gene of fish poured out of my soul weapon space like a waterfall, crashing onto the stone ground. Everyone in sight froze, staring at the mountain of fish. Bear 3 asked if I wanted to say something to the crowd. I told him it didn't matter what I said. They cared about eating. What mattered was what he said and did next. I patted his shoulder and walked away. His show now? He did well. He shouted at the crowd. Forget who you were before. The orcs made you slaves. Our master saved you and fed you. So give him your loyalty. Join the guard. Fight for the master, and you'll eat your fill. Do great things and earn gold, land, maybe even become a lord. 1,500 spots only. People rushed forward. A big man knelt first, saying he wanted to serve and eat meat. Then a caravan guard with trainee knight strength. Then former city guards, blacksmiths, carpenters, leatherworkers, hunters, and many skinny farmhands. By evening, over 6,000 had volunteered. Bear 3 picked 1,500 ready for immediate combat, screened out the sick and too young, and still had 3,000 more who could fight after some rest and food. He looked at the mountain of fish, then at the list of 5,000 names, and sighed. So many mouths to feed. I rode west from North Wind City with my escorts, following a dirt road. About 7 or 8 miles out, we found some thatched huts. I noticed fresh footprints in wet mud and recently dug soil in the garden. I sent my escorts in. They kicked down the door and dragged out 3 men in merchant clothes, shoving them to their knees. They begged for mercy and offered ransom money. My escort Thomas started slapping them around, demanding answers, though at first he didn't even know what questions to ask. Another escort found turnips growing in the garden. I rode up and looked down at them. They were a trade caravan from Viscount Wiltz's family, originally 12 people who came from the capital to buy furs. When the orcs took the city, they got trapped. 3 of them were too scared to run, so they hid in this settlement, surviving on raw turnips for 3 days. They told me the road had 7 small settlements numbered 1 through 7, each 5 miles apart, set up by Viscount North Wind as rest stops for traders. Each had 3 to 5 families, maybe 20 people. When the orcs came, most of the settlers fled into the forest. The merchants said the forest people wouldn't let them join because food was too scarce. Their collected furs were stored at settlement number 2. They offered everything: furs, gold coins, whatever I wanted, just to stay alive. I told my men to stop hitting them and take them back to the city. Feed them a good meal and let them rest. I kept riding west. At the next settlement, 5 miles on, my escorts checked the huts and gardens. Someone had been living there recently, footprints inside, a clean stove, turnips pulled from the ground within the last 2 days. People were close by, hiding in the woods. The sun was getting low. I sent 4 escorts to ride the full length of the road to the last settlement, telling anyone they found that the orcs were gone and this land now belonged to the Morningstar Legion. I turned back toward the city with the remaining escorts. In the bushes along the road, I could feel eyes watching. When they saw we were human, not orcs, the tension around us seemed to ease. At dawn, 1,500 new soldiers and 500 laborers headed west along the road with sacks and carts. They'd dig up turnips from the settlements and hunt in the forest. After eating fish and receiving soul blood last night, they were already stronger and full of energy. My intelligence told me the merchant caravan originally had 12 people. 9 were killed by orcs while fleeing. Their furs were safe in a cellar at Settlement 2. On the Hope Plains, the war was deadlocked. Orcs were hammering Hope City in the east, while Sigmund's counterattack in the west moved slowly. The orc tribal leaders decided to send their loot and captured slaves back to their tribes to lighten the load. The lone orc survivor from our ambush had fled into the mountains and exaggerated the story, making the orcs think humans had launched a full counterattack. They all retreated to Black Mountain Castle in fear. The 4th report warned me, 2,000 people entering the forest would disturb territorial magic beasts that would attack intruders. I thought about how to use the situation. I'd keep the mountain orcs bottled up for now. When the western orc forces eventually retreated, they'd find their path blocked and be forced east toward the main battlefield instead. Less pressure on me. I rode west past my troops. Near Settlement 3, I heard arrows hitting wood and a pig screaming. I jumped off my horse and ran into the forest. A massive black boar, big as a cow, with skin like armor and gleaming tusks, was tearing people apart. It had stomped one man and ripped him open with its tusks. A boy was shooting arrows that bounced right off. 2 men were trying to drag the boy away, yelling that only a noble knight could kill a magic beast. I charged in with my sword blazing blue. I slashed the boar's hind leg open. It spun and rammed the tree I jumped onto, shaking the whole thing. I leaped down and drove my sword into its spine between the bones. The blade stuck. The boar thrashed and threw me off, but its back legs gave out. My escorts tried hacking at it, but their swords just bounced off its hide. I took a spare iron sword, flooded it with every bit of battle energy I had until it hummed and glowed. I circled to its side and swung hard. The head came off clean. The iron sword shattered from the strain, but the job was done. I pulled my good sword from its back, cut off both tusks for materials, and drained its soul with the banner. The survivors were local frontier farmers who hunted furs in autumn and winter. They tried to trap a piglet that strayed from the herd, but the mother came after them. They said there were 7 or 8 more of these ironhide boars at a watering hole about 5 miles deeper in the forest. I told them to lead the way. The hunter led us through the forest for half an hour until we found the water hole. 7 or 8 black pigs were wallowing in the mud, 1 big mother and 7 piglets splashing around. I asked why they called them ironhide pigs. The hunter said their skin was harder than iron. Blades couldn't even leave a mark. I wanted the piglets alive. I jumped forward to charge and sank into the mud up to my shins. Took me a while to pull myself out. The mother pig lowered her head and charged at me. I sidestepped at the last second and slashed her neck halfway through. She slid forward and crashed into a tree. My escorts dove into the mud after the piglets. It took a long, messy struggle, but they caught all 7 and tied their legs with vines. They looked like mud creatures by the end. I drained the mother's soul into my banner and told them to take the piglets back to raise. Then I felt something through the soul banner, several of my soldiers' souls flowing in. Someone had died in battle somewhere. Bear 2's area? Bear 1's. I had no way to know the details. I pushed the worry aside. I sent the escorts with the piglets back and had others continue west to find the frontier farmers and ask about magic beasts in the area. These families had lived in this forest for generations. They'd know where every dangerous creature was. Then wolf howls broke out in the forest. My escort Harold counted over a dozen voices. I told him to relax. Ordinary wolves were good practice for the trainee knights. But it wasn't ordinary. My escort Luke came galloping back, reporting they'd run into a wolf pack led by a magic beast. A wolf 3 times normal size, running on 3 legs with 1 injured, still faster than regular wolves. Arrows bounced off it. It had already killed 2 of our men on contact. I figured that if the alpha wolf was fleeing east with an injury, something even more dangerous must be lurking deeper in the western forest. First things first, kill the wolf. Before I could move, 5 gray wolves burst from the trees. I kicked the first one away, punched through the second one's skull, grabbed the third by the neck, and snapped it. Then the magic wolf hit me. I barely saw it coming. A gray blur that slammed into me so hard I crashed through a thatched hut. It dove into the wreckage after me, jaws snapping. I rolled clear just as its teeth crunched through a wooden plank. I sprang up and faced it. When it leaped over me, I slashed upward and opened its belly. We circled each other in the ruins. It lunged again. Its claws scraped 3 white lines across my chest plate. I swung at its side, but it twisted midair and dodged. It came back immediately, too fast to avoid. I caught it with my left arm jammed under its jaw, keeping those fangs from my throat, and drove my sword into its chest with my right hand. I twisted the blade and shoved it into the hilt. The wolf went rigid, then went limp. Blood poured down the sword onto me. I kicked the body off and stood there gasping. Luke ran up covered in blood and told me Harold was dead. A wolf had bitten through his neck. I told them to bring Harold's body back for a proper burial. Then I thought about it. This magic wolf had been driven out of the deeper forest by something even stronger. Whatever that was, I couldn't handle it right now. I called it a day and ordered everyone back to rest. I drained the magic wolf's soul into my banner. One more soul bead, one more bit of strength. That evening my escorts reported the day's haul. Over 10,000 gene of meat from hunting, 29 wolves, 8 wild boars, 12 deer, 7 roe deer, 40+ rabbits, and over 100 birds. More than 100,000 gene of nuts, hazelnuts, pine nuts, acorns, walnuts. 50,000 gene of turnips from the frontier settlements, plus pickled vegetables, and about 1,000 gene of beans. Combined with the 100,000 gene of fish, we had enough to last a while. Luke explained why the harvest was so large. These were frontier logging settlements, not farming villages. Their job was felling trees and hunting. The turnips and beans they grew on the side didn't need to be taxed. Regular farming settlements had almost nothing left after paying their lords. Those people barely ate all year. The casualties were light, 3 dead, 9 wounded, mostly from the magic wolf. The frontier farmers told us about 2 more dangerous magic beasts nearby. A black bear south of Settlement 6 that could shatter trees with one swipe, and a snake of unknown size near the mountains west of Settlement 7. Viscount Northwind had once sent soldiers to hunt it, and after that, all frontier expansion stopped. I didn't have weapons strong enough for high-rank beasts. My cart crossbows worked on orcs, but were weak against magic beasts. I was only a bronze knight. I could maybe handle a second-rank beast, but anything stronger could kill me. I ordered another 1,000 soldiers selected and dismissed everyone. I sat alone looking at the former Viscount's arrogant portrait on the wall. He'd run away and lost everything. War was still the priority. Territory development could wait. Next morning, the intelligence reports brought major changes. Baron Black Mountain had returned to his castle and ran straight into the retreating orcs. He fought to the death, killing the orc leader before dying himself. News of the frozen Northwind fortress had spread to all northern nobles. Small lords near Hope City started attacking orc supply lines, boosting morale everywhere. The orcs saw things turning against them and sped up moving their stolen slaves and loot back to their tribes. Meanwhile, powerful nobles in the duchy were furious at Commander Sigmund for focusing on the western front while orcs ravaged the east. Grand Duke Steinine ordered him to split forces and reinforce Hope City. The orcs were accelerating their retreat. If I wanted to intercept their slaves and supplies, I needed to move fast and block both the orcs and the noble armies from entering my territory. I opened the Baron's map journal and traced the route south from Northwind Fortress through Creek Valley to Black Pine Ridge. There was one forest road southeast of Black Pine that connected to the outside world. If I built a fortress there to seal it, I could control this entire region. I sent word to Bear 1. Dispatch an orc company to clean out Black Mountain Castle. then survey both Creek Valley and Black Mountain territories within 5 days. I needed exact counts of people and resources. 1,000 new soldiers were already assembled and waiting. 1,000 new recruits knelt in the square and swore their oath. I collected their soul blood, released the banner's power into them, and sent them off to eat meat porridge. I told Bear 3 the plan. The orcs had captured huge numbers of slaves and supplies from the south, and they didn't know yet that Northwind Fortress was frozen shut. When they tried to bring everything north through our territory, we'd intercept them. We could gain tens of thousands of slaves. I rode south with 1,500 soldiers. We marched 50 miles in 1 day. Nobody fell behind. Nobody complained. In my old world, that distance would have broken most men, but in this world of supernatural strength, it was manageable. We camped on high ground. I studied the map. About 60 miles south of our position was Black Pine Forest, a 20-mile stretch of road flanked by dense woods and swamps on both sides. Any orc convoy heading north from the Hope Plains had to pass through it. The key was not to do this just once. I'd set up multiple small forts along the road to divide the orc convoys into pieces and eat them one group at a time. Maximum gain, minimum cost. Morning intelligence confirmed my timing. The orcs at Black Mountain Castle had surrendered easily to our orc soldiers after their leader died. Bear 1 was already searching nearby settlements for hidden food and supplies. Near Hope City, noble armies were hitting the orcs hard. Several orc chiefs decided to move their slaves and loot north early. Last night, 30 orcs set out with 2,000 human slaves and 200 carts of grain and treasure. They'd reach Black Pine Forest in 4 days. My brother Jolin had killed 3 orcs fighting alongside Baron Black Pine and earned a reward, a low-grade body potion that would make him a trainee knight within 3 days. And Merchant Edwin was coming by sea with supplies, arriving at Coastal Camp in 9 days. Everything was moving faster than expected. Good thing the Black Mountain orcs were already dealt with. I sent Luke to find Bear 1 and bring him south with the orc soldiers, orc recruits, and every cart crossbow we had. Then I ordered the whole army to run. We had to reach Black Pine Forest before dark. We arrived at the forest entrance around noon. I marked out positions for 3 camps in a triangle pattern, 1 blocking the road ahead, 2 flanking the sides. The orcs would be able to walk in but never walk out. 1,500 soldiers spread out and started building, cutting trees, digging trenches, raising walls. The trap was taking shape. I woke up in the middle of the night, my mind racing. This forest road was 20 miles long with no natural barriers. If orcs scattered into the woods during a fight, my men could never find them all. One survivor getting away would ruin everything. The orcs would know about the trap and avoid the route entirely. Fences and pit traps wouldn't work. 20 miles was too much ground to cover, and the orcs would get suspicious seeing obstacles appear out of nowhere. I pulled out the map and studied it by lamplight. There was a lake right in the middle of the road, about 10 miles in. Any convoy would be tired and thirsty by that point and would naturally stop there to rest. Perfect ambush spot. The plan came together. I'd build a camp at the southern entrance too, manned by orc soldiers pretending to be a regular orc outpost guarding against human pursuers. When orc convoys came north from the plains, they'd be waved right in, thinking it was safe. By the time they reached the lake and stopped to rest, I'd hit them from both sides. Even if a few escaped, the plan would already be well underway by then, and orcs who learned the route was a trap would just avoid it rather than fight me. Late-night intelligence confirmed the urgency. Commander Sigmund was finally moving his full army out to fight the orc main force, hoping to crush them quickly and free up troops for Hope City. The orcs had learned from prisoners that Northwind Fortress was frozen, and they were sending 2 wolf riders, elite black iron level warriors on magic wolf mounts, to scout and confirm. Meanwhile, my orc soldiers were getting stronger under the Soul Banner's influence. 13 had broken through to orc warrior level, equal to late trainee knights. 4 had awakened elemental sensing and become orc shamans, equal to mid-level mage apprentices. And my soul weapon was about to evolve. If I could absorb a thread of purple sunrise energy at the moment of dawn, the living space inside would expand dramatically. I couldn't risk sleeping through dawn. I called Bear 1 in. He brought 200 orc soldiers and 300 orc prisoners. The carpenter mill had built 13 cart crossbows total, but the bowstrings kept snapping. They'd have to do. I ordered Bear 1 to take the orc soldiers and a full battalion south to the forest's exit and build a defensive fort there. The fort had to serve two purposes: lure orc convoys inside, and keep the human noble armies out. I told him to let the orc soldiers use their brains to figure out how to trick their own kind. The best performer would be promoted to orc battalion commander. Bear 1 understood. The orcs would man the southern entrance openly. When returning orc convoys appeared, they'd talk them into entering the forest. Then we'd eliminate the escorts and seize the slaves and supplies. I told him to move at first light. Then I walked outside with Thomas and stood on a hill in the dark, waiting for dawn. I sat cross-legged on the hilltop and meditated, breathing slow and deep. Thomas stood guard below. I sank my mind into my consciousness, where the sole weapon ship floated quietly, glowing blood red. I stopped thinking about plans and war and just felt the world breathing, waiting for dawn. Then it happened. The instant the first light cracked the horizon, a wisp of purple energy drifted across the sky like smoke and flowed into me. It settled onto the sole weapon ship, and everything started changing. The ship grew larger. The compartments inside expanded, longer, wider, deeper. Above the core, a small space filled with life energy, forming something like a tiny paradise. My mind felt clearer and sharper than ever before. With my eyes still closed, I could suddenly see glowing particles floating all around me. I reached for them, but my hand passed right through. Then the sun fully rose, and they vanished instantly, as if they'd never existed. I opened my eyes. Those light particles, they had to be elements. The intelligence about orc soldiers awakening elemental talents, becoming shamans equal to mage apprentices. This world didn't just have knights. It had mages too. Magic scrolls, iron dragons, elemental powers. This world was far more interesting than I'd thought. Back at camp, Bear 1 had already left with his troops heading south. He'd been frantic because he couldn't find Thomas and didn't know how long the forest road was. Thomas caught up and told him it was only 20 miles. Just stop when he reached the southern exit. I'd forgotten to tell Bear 1 something important. 2 orc wolf riders were coming to scout, black iron-level warriors riding magic wolves. I told Thomas to have the orc soldiers at the southern fort try to fool them into believing the area was still under orc control. If the scouts believed it, perfect. If they didn't, let them in and kill them. Wolf riders were fast, hard to chase. I told Thomas to think of a way to make them stop, then hit them with a volley from the cart crossbows. His eyes lit up. He understood. I walked back into camp to eat breakfast. At the southern exit of Black Pine Forest, Bear 1 got to work building the fort. He tested the first wooden walls and found them too flimsy. Thin stakes wouldn't hold against a real attack. He needed something stronger. He sent the orc soldier Galyalu south with a patrol squad. The orders were simple. If they met any orcs, tell them the area was still under orc control and encourage them to come through. If they met humans, same story, orcs own this land. Galyalu understood. Bear 1 sweetened the deal by telling him the best performer would be promoted to orc battalion commander, just as I promised. Then Bear 1 gathered his squad leaders to plan the fort's design. They needed to separate incoming slaves from orc escorts without raising suspicion. One of the squad leaders, a former sheep herder, had a clever idea. Build 2 exits on the north side of the fort. A small low one that people had to crawl through, meant for slaves, and a tall grand one for the victorious orc warriors. Behind the exits, hidden wooden walls would split the 2 groups into separate channels. The orcs would walk right into a kill zone, while the slaves were safely diverted. If the orcs cooperated, the orc soldiers could ambush them quietly. If not, push them deeper into the fort where they could be killed far enough away that the next convoy wouldn't hear the fighting. For defense against counterattacks, whether from orcs or human noble armies, they'd build double wooden walls filled with packed earth in between and dig trenches around the perimeter. The excavated dirt would go into the walls. Thomas arrived with 4 more companies, 500 soldiers, and passed along my warning about the 2 wolf riders coming to scout. They were black iron-level fighters on magic wolf mounts. If the orc soldiers could convince them the road was safe, perfect. If not, Thomas was to figure out how to make them stop moving long enough for a cart crossbow volley. Bear 1 immediately asked if Thomas had brought the crossbows. Thomas delivered all 13 cart crossbows to Bear 1 at the southern fort. Meanwhile, the 2 orc wolf riders arrived from the Hope Plains. They spotted Galyalu's patrol near the forest entrance and got suspicious at first. Why were orcs patrolling here? They hid in the grass and watched. After seeing a second patrol group pass by, they decided it was safe enough to show themselves. Gallilu played his part. He told them his squad was patrolling while the rest of the tribe built a camp, somewhere for returning or convoys to rest. Naturally, they'd charge a small fee for the service. The Wolf Riders relaxed a little when they heard that. Sounded normal enough. But then they asked the tribe's name. Gallilu froze for a second and blurted out, Morning Star. The lead Wolf Rider had never heard of it and got suspicious again. Both riders charged past Gallilu toward the camp. What they saw actually helped convince them. Over 100 strong, well-fed orc soldiers working alongside human laborers, building a real fort. Gallilu caught up, panting. The Wolf Riders noticed he was warrior-level strong, well-muscled, and smelled like roasted meat. He told them his old tribe had no name and never had enough food, but now he ate meat every day. When they asked about shamans, Gallilu said the tribe had several. That impressed them. Only powerful tribes had multiple shamans. They declined his invitation to come inside for food and turned south to report back. But after riding a distance, the lead Wolf Rider realized they'd forgotten to ask about the frozen Northwind Fortress. His partner argued it couldn't be true. If the fortress was really sealed, why would these orcs stay here collecting tolls instead of fleeing? But the lead rider wasn't satisfied. He told his partner to go back and report while he circled west to cut through Black Pine Forest himself. He needed to see the fortress with his own eyes. The two split up, one heading south, the other plunging into the forest alone. Thomas came back and reported that the Wolf Riders had been fooled and headed south. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but I stood by the lake staring at the water, feeling uneasy. Elite Wolf Riders shouldn't be that easy to trick. They should have at least checked the full length of the road. Something wasn't right. I went to sleep, but woke in the middle of the night and checked my intelligence. Just as I feared, one of the Wolf Riders, Kask, had gotten suspicious. He noticed Gallilu wouldn't make eye contact, and the orc soldiers were working too eagerly. He sent his partner south to report while he circled through the western forest alone. By nightfall, he'd crept to our northern camps and seen human soldiers everywhere. He knew it was a trap. He was planning to scout the lake area next and might flee west into the swamps. The other Wolf Rider had delivered the message that orcs up north were charging tolls, which convinced the tribal leaders the frozen fortress was just a rumor. They ordered all tribes to speed up moving their slaves and loot north before heavy snow hit. And Sigmund had spotted the orc retreat and ordered his noble army to chase them hard, press them whether the retreat was real or fake. Good news and bad news at the same time. The orc convoys would come faster now, but first I had to deal with the spy in my camp. I grabbed my sword and walked out. I told Thomas, a Wolf Rider had infiltrated the area. Wake everyone, search every corner. Squads of 5 with torches sealed the roads and checked every hiding spot. Someone spotted ripples on the lake surface. Soldiers rushed over. A shadow burst from the shore and ran west. I ordered the infantry back to guard the camps and took only my escorts on horseback. Kask was exhausted. He'd been running all day and night. His wolf stopped to rest, but heard our hooves and bolted again. They ran straight toward the swamp. The wolf's paws hit soft mud and it panicked. It plunged in and started sinking. Kask jumped off its back just in time, landing on solid ground. He heard his wolf howling as it sank, closed his eyes for a moment, then drew his blade and charged toward us with fury in his eyes. I dismounted my escorts and formed a spear line. I warned them about the swamp. If anyone fell in, lay their spear flat to stay on the surface. Then I took my longbow and shot at the charging shadow. My first arrow grazed his forearm. He started zigzagging, but my second arrow caught his ribs. He turned to run and stepped right into a sinkhole. He thrashed in the water but only sank deeper. My escorts approached carefully, testing every step with their spears. When they found him, 5 spears thrust in at once. He grabbed one and pulled himself up. I put an arrow through his stomach. He screamed, "Let go," and 10 spears shoved him under. Bubbles rose for a moment, then stopped. I used the soul banner to pull his soul from the water. It worked. Not just magic beasts, human souls could be refined too. Good to know. His soul became another bead in the banner. Thomas found the wolf's body nearby, half buried in mud. We dragged it out, and I drained that soul too. Both rider and mount absorbed. We rode back to camp. The salvage of whatever the Wolf Rider carried could wait until morning. I spent 2 days building up the camps and setting up farming settlements every 5 miles north of Black Pine Forest along the road. Then a rider came galloping from the south. The first orc convoy had entered the southern fort. The orc soldiers had welcomed them with food and drink, just as planned. 3 orcs ate their fill and left to report back south that the route was safe. My intelligence filled in the details. This first group had 30 orcs escorting 200 carts of supplies and over 2,000 slaves. 5 spies were hidden among them. 3 orc scouts who confirmed the entrance was safe and went back to report, plus 2 human spies mixed in with the slaves, planted for a future counterattack. Those human spies were walking right into my hands. Other news. The orc chief heard that troops from Hope City were retreating north, so he ordered the western orc forces to swing east and join the main army near Hope City. He also warned all tribes about the frozen fortress and told them to watch for human traps. And Edwin the merchant had set sail, 6 ships carrying grain, weapons, and cloth, heading for coastal camp. 9 days out. The trap at the southern fort worked perfectly. The orc soldiers fed the convoy warriors meat and cheap wine until they were relaxed and laughing. Meanwhile, the slaves crawled through the low doorway, the dog hole, into a separate channel. The supply carts were wheeled through a tall, wide gate into another passage. The orcs laughed at the slaves crawling, never suspecting anything. When the orcs finished eating, the orc soldiers walked them into the long corridor, chatting like brothers. The orcs got nervous about how long the passage was, but the soldiers kept them calm. One orc stepped on a wooden platform and worried it was a trap. An orc soldier jumped on it to prove it was solid. Then the knives came out. Every orc soldier stabbed the nearest convoy orc at the same moment. Some orcs asked why. Some begged. Some offered to share the loot. Nobody answered. Nobody stopped. 27 orcs died in the corridor in less than a minute. The slaves waiting at the exit saw the bodies dragged out. Some looked away. Some closed their eyes. Some trembled. Nobody screamed or ran. They just stood there, numb. Bear 3 stepped forward and told them they were rescued. From today, they were Morningstar Legion farmers. Work hard, earn merit, and they could join the guard. Go north to the second camp, eat a full meal, and receive assignments. The 2,000 slaves stared at him in disbelief, then broke down crying. Bear 3 let them cry it out, then waved them north. They helped each other up and stumbled forward in a ragged line, heading toward their new lives. 3 good days in a row. Every day more orc convoys walked into the trap, more slaves were freed, more supply carts seized. The orcs kept coming one group after another, like they were lining up to die. North of the forest, new farming settlements were popping up across Black Pine and Creek Valley territories to house all the rescued people. But there was a problem hiding among the rescued slaves, spies. The nobles down south had planted scouts in the slave columns, hoping to gather intelligence for their counterattack. Over 100 of them, spread across the new settlements. In one farmstead, 5 spies were huddled together trying to figure out their situation. They'd realized this territory had already been seized by someone called Alan Morningstar. One of them recognized the name. His lord's escort was Jolan Morningstar, who had a brother named Alan. The others laughed it off. How could an escort's little brother build an army, capture territories, and intercept orc convoys? Impossible. They were struggling to gather any useful intelligence. Each settlement only had 100 people, patrols were everywhere, and they were stuck on the edge of Black Pine Forest, over 100 miles from North Wind City with nothing but identical farmsteads in every direction. They never got the chance to report back. My soldiers kicked in their door and put spears to their chests. The squad leader mocked them. Not a single trainee knight among them. Useless as spies. One of them grabbed a spear and drove it into his own chest rather than be captured, worried his family would suffer if he was taken alive. The other 4 surrendered. The same scene played out in dozens of settlements at the same time. My people had been watching them from the start. I stood at the camp gate looking at over 100 spies strung together with rope. Luke told me we'd settled over 300 new farmsteads so far, 100 people each, 30,000, plus the expanded construction units. About 40,000 people total intercepted. Today was probably the last day of good hunting. If we added another 30,000, we'd have 80,000 mouths to feed. Food was becoming the real crisis. We'd captured 119 spies alive and killed 7 who resisted. I thought about what to do with them. Couldn't give them freedom. They were trained spies. Killing them was wasteful. I sent them to Riftwind Fortress under Bear 2's watch. He'd keep them locked down and put them to work. No escapes. I mounted up and rode south to check on the first camp. I rode south through the forest with Luke, watching the endless stream of people flowing north along the road. He asked how the orc convoys kept falling for the trap so easily. I explained, orc society worked like feudal nobility. The common orc warriors were basically serfs who never ate well. After a campaign, the chiefs took all the loot and the soldiers got nothing. So when someone offered them free meat and wine after hundreds of miles of marching, they couldn't resist. The wine trick was simple too. We barely had any real alcohol, just a little scraped together from the captured castles. Bear 1 mixed in some mineral powder that made the orcs drowsy fast. A little went a long way. What really impressed me was how the orc soldiers kept everything quiet. Hundreds of orcs killed over several days and no alarm raised. Luke guessed someone talented had emerged among the orc recruits. He was right. At the southern fort, Bear 1 reported the day's haul. Over 10,000 slaves, 300 carts of supplies, and 200 orcs, just this morning. More were expected because the noble army was pressing harder. The reason the orc convoys never questioned anything was the 4 orc shamans among our soldiers. Shamans held enormous authority in orc culture. When they spoke, no orc dared challenge them. They just accepted whatever the shaman said and walked right into the trap. I promoted the best performing orc soldier to battalion commander and gave him the name Slave 1. The orc warriors became company leaders. I'd form a separate warrior unit once we had enough. The shamans I'd handle personally later. I rewarded Slave 1 with a farming settlement of his own. The other orc soldiers watched with hungry eyes. I told them they'd all have the same chance. Earn merit, earn a name, earn land. I watched through a hidden viewing port as orc convoy warriors stuffed themselves with meat and doctored wine, red-faced and laughing. A few of them finished eating, said goodbye to our orc soldiers, and jogged back south to report that the road was safe. More would come. That night, I reviewed the supply lists. 7 pages of numbers. 70,000 human slaves total, 30,000 just today. 70,000 people with no organization, no willpower, no spirit. Just scattered sand. No wonder the orcs loved capturing humans as slaves. I leaned back and rubbed my temples. Feeding all these people was going to be the hardest battle yet. I was dozing at the table, worrying about feeding 70,000 new people, when a log popped in the fire and woke me. I heard shouting from outside, crying and begging from the south. I checked the intelligence immediately. The news was bad. One of the orc scouts who'd eaten at our fort and gone back to report had suddenly started vomiting blood and died. The orc leaders examined the body and realized he'd been poisoned. They connected it to the free food and wine and knew they'd been tricked. They mobilized immediately, marched through the night, and were already outside. Their plan: send 200 orcs to beg at the gate and get it opened. Then 5,000 warriors would rush in behind them. I cursed and grabbed my helmet. I ran outside shouting orders. Nobody opens the gate without my command. Find Bear 1. Tell him the plan is blown. Prepare for battle. I rode to the south gate and climbed the wall. Below, 200 orcs were crying and pleading. Brothers, open up. You promised food and drink. We marched all night. We're cold and hungry. Others claimed the noble army was chasing them and they needed shelter. One even jingled a bag of gold coins, offering to pay for entry. Slave 1 stood on the wall, stone-faced, gripping his spiked club. He told them the fort's rules said gates don't open until dawn. He knew something was wrong. These orcs showing up in the middle of the night, begging to get in, didn't fit the pattern. The master wanted slaves and supplies, not desperate warriors at midnight. I studied the scene. The orcs kept repeating the same few lines over and over, no variation. Scripted. I ordered Bear 1 to raise the banners, bring all soldiers to the walls, and prepare for battle. Rows of spearmen climbed up, their weapons gleaming in the moonlight. A young soldier leaned over the wall and shouted down. Idiots. Can't even come up with new lines? My ears are growing calluses from hearing the same thing. The orcs below saw hundreds of armed human soldiers lining the walls and panicked. Someone yelled, "Run," and all 200 of them scattered into the darkness. I looked at the fort's walls more carefully for the first time. Bear 1 had built them thick, double wood packed with earth, using soil from deep trenches dug all around. The high ground plus the raised walls made it a real defensive position. He wasn't building a trading post. He was building a fortress. Smart thinking. No stone available, but wood and earth would hold for now. I told him to mount the crossbow mechanisms from the cart crossbows onto the walls. When the orcs came back with their full force, I wanted to hurt them badly on the first volley. The 200 orcs who tried to bluff the gate ran back screaming that it was a trap. Human soldiers everywhere, walls packed with troops. The orc chiefs were furious. They cursed the Morning Star tribe, cursed the traitor orcs who'd fooled them, and cursed themselves for blindly trusting shamans. They rallied 5,000 warriors and pushed toward the fort with 1,000 human slaves as a vanguard. I stood on the wall and checked my intelligence while Bear 1 tightened defenses. Good news. The orc chief's messenger was on his way and would arrive around 10, ordering these orcs to turn east. Sigmund was splitting his army, sending the noble coalition north to chase retreating orcs while he took 20,000 soldiers east to reinforce Hope City. And Edwin's ships would reach coastal camp by evening. The orcs were a short-term problem. Hold until noon and they'd leave on their own. The real question was what came after. The noble army would be right behind them. If I let the nobles in, they'd loot everything I'd built. If I kept them out, they'd attack. Either way meant fighting. So be it. The attack began. The orcs pushed 200 slaves forward as shields. Slaves fell into the pit traps on both sides of the road, impaled on wooden stakes. Then our crossbows fired. Over a dozen bolts ripped through the crowd on the main road, punching through multiple bodies. The surviving slaves broke and ran, only to fall into more pits. The ones who fled back were beaten to death by their own orc masters. The orc chiefs decided to go all in. 3,000 warriors with 800 remaining slaves as meat shields, charging straight up the road. Our crossbows fired over the slaves' heads into the orc mass behind, skewering them like beads on a string. The orcs lost patience and trampled their own slave shield, killing all 800 in seconds just to charge faster. We kept firing. Bolt after bolt turned the road into a forest of wooden shafts blocking the path. About 100 orcs reached the wall and started climbing on each other's shoulders. Our trainee knights met them at the top. Swords and spears cut them down in moments. The orc chiefs were shaking with rage, ready to throw everything in for another wave. Then a wolf rider came galloping from the south with a command flag. Chief's orders: stop the attack. Turn east immediately. Northwind Fortress is confirmed frozen. This road is blocked. The chiefs argued, protested about their lost supplies, but the messenger was firm. The chief would provide new supplies. The noble army was less than half a day behind. They looked at our red banners flying on the walls, swallowed their fury, and turned east without looking back. The orcs turned east and my soldiers erupted in cheers. Bear 1 asked about pursuing them. I told him no, go collect the spoils instead. The gates opened and soldiers rushed out to recover crossbow bolts, strip orc bodies, and haul in the abandoned supply carts. We barely got the last carts inside before a scout came galloping. The noble army was 5 miles out. Bear 1 screamed at everyone to move faster. The final wagons were practically thrown through the gate before it slammed shut. Minutes later, several knights rode up and stopped just outside arrow range. One called himself Hermann, from Viscount Wald's 3rd Cavalry Company. He demanded to know which noble family we belonged to and who gave us orders. Bear 1 didn't know what to say. I'd never claimed any noble title. He told them to wait and ran to ask me. I told him to say this area belonged to the Morning Star Legion. If they had questions, they should take it up with the Silver Moon Marquis. If they forced their way in, treat it as an act of war and kill them. If they came peacefully as guests, we could let a few in to trade. Bear 1 relayed the message. The knights were confused and rode back to their camp. The name Silver Moon Marquis caused quite a stir. Count Darahai, who turned out to be the Silver Moon Marquis's own grandson, was shocked. He insisted his grandfather had never mentioned any forces in the north, not even secretly supported ones. But Viscount Wald cautioned him. Anyone who could hold this road against orcs and build a fortress here wasn't ordinary. Better to investigate before making enemies. If it really was the Marquis's arrangement and they offended these people, that would be hard to explain. Darahai sent an escort to the fort, identifying himself as Count Darahai of the Silver Moon family, requesting to meet whoever was in charge. The Silver Moon family's escort rode up to the gate demanding to see our leader. Bear 1 handled it perfectly, asked what specific business he had, refused entry without my permission, and gave nothing away. The escort tried different angles, asked if we were all slaves, asked if we were placed here by the Silver Moon Marquis. Bear 1 answered nothing useful and walked away to consult me. I told him to say I was busy and had left to receive Silver Moon family guests. Under no circumstances let anyone inside. We were too weak and had seized too much. If these nobles learned our true strength, they wouldn't hesitate to take everything by force. Bear 1 went back up and delivered the message. The escort studied his face and seemed to recognize him. Bear 1 had once been a Silver Moon Trading Company guard before being sold off as a scapegoat. The escort rode back to report. Count Darahai was furious that I hadn't come to greet him personally. His escort mentioned recognizing the man on the wall as a former family guard. The other nobles smirked. Viscount Wald suggested this was clearly the Silver Moon family's secret operation, except they didn't acknowledge their own grandson. Darahai's face turned red. He sent the escort back to the family estate to investigate. A young noble named Reinhard, the former heir to the North Wind Viscounty, demanded they attack and retake the territory. Darahai shut him down. He pointed at the orc bodies outside the fort. These people had beaten thousands of orcs. The real enemy was still the orc army. He wouldn't waste soldiers fighting fellow humans. He gave Reinhard 2 choices. First, take his own men and try to reclaim his lands himself. Fight through the forest or circle around through Red Maple County and attack from the rear through Riftwind Canyon. Darahai would look the other way. Second, accept a frontier decree and go colonize orc territory beyond the mountains. Baron Blackpine, Sorrel, my brother's lord, stepped forward and asked for time to discuss. Darahai agreed, then ordered the 30,000-strong noble army to march east after the orcs. The displaced northern nobles stood there watching the army leave. They looked at our red banners on the fort walls one last time, then reluctantly turned their horses and rode away to find shelter in the nearest friendly territory. For now, they couldn't do anything. The forest had magic beasts and swamps. Attacking blind would be suicide. I rode north through the new farming settlements, smiling to myself about the Silver Moon Bluff. Let the nobles guess. The more they guessed, the more careful they'd be. The more careful, the less likely to attack. I'd read about this trick 100 times in my old life. At sunset, I reached coastal camp and found Edwin's 6 ships already docked at the new pier. He was overjoyed to see me. He'd brought 18,000 jean of grain across 3 ships, plus 800 rolls of linen, 5,000 sets of leather armor, 200 knight swords, and 2,000 spears. I told him the grain wasn't enough. He asked how many people I was feeding. I said each person would get less than 2 jean from what he brought. Do the math. He gasped when he realized I might have close to 100,000 people. I bought everything he had. Grain at 20 copper coins per jean, higher than his cost of 13. He tried to refuse the overpayment, but I insisted. I wanted him motivated to keep shipping. The total for the grain alone came to 360 gold coins. I told him not to worry about payment. By the time he got back to St. Laurent, he'd be hearing about what I'd done. I asked him to leave 2 ships behind for fishing and bring fishing boats next time. He figured out I'd been raiding orc supply convoys. Smart man. He was worried about orc retaliation, but I brushed it off. I told him I was building a port town here. He realized this was technically Black Pine Baron's territory and got nervous. I changed the subject. Then he pulled out a surprise, a frontier decree. A magic scroll from the duchy's noble council. Sign my name, draw my coat of arms and banner, and the true name scroll in St. Laurent would register me as a baron of the Rhine Duchy. He showed me the gold-bordered parchment with magic patterns, explaining each blank space. Name, title, achievements, family crest, battle flag. I rolled it up and set it aside. I asked him about magic instead. He was confused why I wasn't more excited about becoming a noble. I told him orcs had warriors and shamans. Humans must have knights and mages. He got quiet and leaned in close. He'd heard there was a mage academy in the mountains southeast of St. Laurent. The founder of the Rhine Duchy was supposedly a mage himself, but getting in required both talent and a recommendation from someone connected. Even the Silver Moon Marquis's entire family hadn't managed to get a single person admitted. He didn't know the specific requirements. Mage business was beyond ordinary people's reach. I didn't press further. We ate our roasted meat in silence by the fire. That night I sat with the Frontier Decree, studying every line and pattern. I was still only Bronze Knight level, second of 6 knight ranks. The old noble families had generations of accumulated power. If I declared independence too boldly, they'd all come after me. But I needed to play within their system. When I tried writing my name, the ink wouldn't stick. It beat it up and wiped right off. Then I noticed every existing letter on the scroll had tiny energy flowing through it. I channeled battle energy through the pen and into the ink. This time it worked. The letters sank into the parchment and became permanent, sealed with my own energy. Clever security. You needed at least Bronze Knight strength to even sign the thing. A stolen decree was useless if you couldn't write on it. I filled in my name, drew my crest and banner, and the Morning Star Barony was official. Morning intelligence told me Count Darahai had sent a 5-man night squad through Black Pine Forest into Black Mountain territory to investigate me. His escort had recognized Bear One as a former Silver Moon Trading Company guard and was heading back to check the records. And the new Viscount Northwind Heir, Reinhard, had decided to reclaim his lands. Baron Blackpine would send scouts through the forest while Reinhard went south to recruit adventurers and buy supplies. I invited Edwin to tour my territory before he left. We rode through settlement after settlement, every road lined with new farmsteads as far as you could see. He was stunned. He estimated the population was larger than most Viscounties. He explained normal scales. A barony had 2,000 or 3,000 people across 10 miles, a viscounty 30,000 to 50,000 across 50 miles, a county over 100,000. The Silver Moon Marquis controlled maybe 500,000 across several hundred miles. He pointed out my biggest problem: water. These settlements needed drinking water and irrigation. He suggested digging channels from Creek Valley, where several streams converged before flowing into Black Pine Forest and creating swamps. Redirect that water to the plains, and this could become farmland. I told him I already controlled Creek Valley and Black Mountain. Controlling the water source was exactly why. He promised to find people who understood water engineering, even if they were just apprentices. The real experts were all controlled by major nobles. I told him my tax plan: no road tolls, and only 1% trade tax. He nearly fell off his horse. St. Lawrence Port charged 5%. At 1%, every merchant ship would choose to route through my territory instead. He was so excited he turned his horse around immediately, shouting back at me not to change my mind about the rate. I watched him gallop toward the docks and smiled. I sensed 2 groups infiltrating my territory from both sides of Black Pine Forest. The eastern group, 5 knights pushing into the Black Mountain Range. I sent Slave 1 and his orc battalion to handle. Capture them alive if possible. The western group was likely led by trainee knights scouting for Black Pine Baron. I told Bear 3 to sweep the forest systematically, but they had to be taken alive. What I didn't know yet was that my brother Jolin was among the western scouts. He and his group of 10 had entered the forest days ago. Poisonous insects, swamps, and treacherous ground had killed half of them. By the time he neared the western edge, only he and a soldier named David remained. They were exhausted, barely able to walk, stumbling through mud in the dark. They spotted firelight through the trees and dragged themselves toward it. They found a neat row of thatched huts, one of my new farming settlements. They tried to sneak closer, but stepped right into a trap pit dug around the perimeter. The settlers rushed out with torches, excited. They thought they'd caught the spies they'd been warned about. A big farmer peered into the pit and asked which one was the trainee knight. Jolin stepped in front of David and said it was him. The farmer was thrilled. Catching a spy meant he could join the army and become a knight himself. They banged a gong. A patrol squad arrived quickly. The squad leader recognized Jolin's face in the torchlight and quietly ordered his men to pull them up gently and not to hurt them. Jolin noticed that every soldier holding him was at least trainee knight strength. Then he recognized the squad leader, Pega, a farm boy from our old village, one of my childhood friends. Now he was leading a squad of trainee knights. Jolin was baffled. How did a peasant kid end up here commanding soldiers this strong? What kind of force was this? He asked Pega to explain, but Pega just whispered that he didn't have the authority to say anything. Jolin would have to wait and ask the master himself. They brought the captured scouts into my tent. The moment Jolin walked in, I recognized him, my own brother. Alan, he couldn't believe it. I smiled, sat him down in my chair, and sent everyone out. I poured him water. He drank like a man back from the dead. He'd lost half his team crossing the forest. Poisonous insects, swamps, sinkholes. Only he and a soldier named David survived. He told me Baron Black Pine wanted to find an alternate route around my fort. I told him it was hopeless. Those swamp areas were death traps without real strength and preparation. We ate roasted meat and soup together. He asked how I'd treat Black Pine Baron. I told him straight. The Baron abandoned his land and his people. If he stayed away, fine. If he came looking for trouble, he should know that squads like Pegasus, full of trainee knights, were everywhere in my territory. Jolin was shocked. North Wind City had only fallen a month ago. I showed him a basic battle energy condensation manual. His eyes went wide. Even Baron Black Pine didn't have one. I asked how the Baron's own children had broken through to trainee knight. He didn't know. I asked if the Baron taught basic combat forms for condensing battle energy. He'd never heard of such a thing. The Baron had given him a single potion as reward for killing 3 orcs. That was the only reason he'd become a trainee knight at all. I pulled out a glass bottle of golden liquid, a battle energy awakening potion that could push him to Black Iron Knight. He jumped up, then sat back down, assuming it was too precious. I told him it was prepared for him. Once he reached late trainee knight stage, it was his. I offered him more, a chi-nourishing fruit tree, a family treasure that could accelerate his cultivation. With the tree and proper training, he'd reach trainee knight peak by winter's end. Then the potion would make him a Black Iron Knight easily. He was overwhelmed. He asked about my situation, worried I was working for some powerful faction. I told him the truth. Everything north of Black Pine Forest, Black Pine, Creek Valley, Black Mountain, and North Wind City, was mine. As for Baron Black Pine, by duchy law, he'd lost his claim when he abandoned his territory. I took it back from the orcs. I was recovering land for the duchy. I gave him Pega's full squad, 25 trainee knights, as his personal night guard. Their main job was protecting our parents. He'd go see them tomorrow. I told him to stop thinking of himself as a servant son. He was going to be a noble. He sat there with red eyes, struggling between loyalty to the Baron who'd raised our family and the reality of what his little brother had become. I put meat in his hand and told him to eat before it got cold. Tomorrow would be busy. I couldn't sleep. Something about Jolin's mission didn't add up. Sending a weak squad through a deadly forest to scout, Baron Black Pine wasn't stupid enough to waste lives for nothing. Unless that squad was just bait. They'd trigger the traps and mark the path so stronger people could follow safely behind them. The scouts were disposable decoys. I got up and sent Thomas to check if anyone else had come out of the forest along that same route. Then I checked my late-night intelligence. 3 updates. First, my frontier decree had registered with the Noble Council. They found my banner on the true name scroll and recognized me as a frontier baron. Grand Duke Steinine was sending a messenger ordering me to cooperate with Commander Sigmund and attack the orcs from the north. Second, Reinhard was recruiting mercenaries and adventurers with promises of letting them build their own estates. He'd gathered over 200 desperate fighters already. Third, and this made my blood run cold, Baron Black Pine had sent 3 more scout teams into the forest from different directions, each followed by a Black Iron level adventurer. 3 adventurers had turned back when their scout teams died. But one, named Castor, had followed Jolin's trail successfully, made it through the forest, and snuck into my camp. He was hiding somewhere inside, waiting for my tent to go dark so he could assassinate me. I put on my armor and told Thomas to keep patrols grouped together so nobody got picked off alone. Then I extinguished my fire and waited in the dark beside my bed, sword in hand. He came, slipped through the back of the tent with a dagger after cutting the canvas. Step by step toward the bed. In the darkness, I swung. My sword cut through him from right shoulder to left ribs, splitting him nearly in half. He looked down at his own body falling apart, confused. The last thing he saw was what he'd thought was a weapon rack. I drained his soul into the banner. One more beat. My escorts rushed in, searched the camp, and found 5 guards with broken necks in a tent at the edge of camp. 5 men killed silently by a Black Iron adventurer. That was the price of letting someone slip through. In the morning, Jolin left with David under Pega's escort to see our parents at the coast. On the road, Pega told him about the night attack. Jolin asked how strong I was. Pega just shrugged. He'd never seen anything I couldn't kill. This time I hadn't even used battle energy. Just one casual swing. I woke late and reviewed all the recent intelligence again. Reinhard recruiting mercenaries, Black Pine Baron sending scouts, Count Darahai investigating me. the duchy watching. Wolves circling, waiting for the right moment to pounce. I sat up and made my decision. This land was mine, and nobody was taking it. I sent people to check the forest exit where Jolin had come through. They found clear signs that others had followed the same trail. I had a company seal off the area and rode out with 100 men. 3 adventurers were caught walking through the southern edge of Black Pine Forest, following marks left by the dead assassin caster. My patrol found them and brought them out. I looked down at them from my horse. You've got nerve. Coming into my territory for a fake promise of a manor from Black Pine Baron. Their faces went white. They thought Castor had been captured and talked. One of them tried to bluff, said they were just hunters looking for game and herbs. I told them to stop pretending. I knew everything Black Pine Baron was doing. They panicked and drew swords, trying to scatter in 3 directions. My soldiers closed in from all sides with spears, driving them back to back into a tight cluster. One screamed that they'd take people down with them if we didn't let them go. I shook my head in disgust. Weak wills, ready to die for a few acres of land, then ready to betray their employer the moment things went bad. Worthless. I took out my longbow and a steel-tipped arrow, channeled battle energy into it, and shot the loudest one. The arrow punched through his chest and blew half his body apart. Another one threw a hand axe at me. I leaned aside and shot him too. The arrow shattered his sword and sent him flying into a tree. My soldiers swarmed him with spears. The arrows couldn't handle the battle energy though. They cracked apart on impact. I'd need supernatural materials for proper ammunition. I drew my sword for the last one. Blue light coursed along the blade. I leaped off my horse, crossed 15 steps in the air, and brought the sword down. He tried to block. His blade snapped. My sword cut through him and his armor in one stroke, splitting him in 2. 3 souls refined into 3 soul beads. I ordered continued patrols of the entire forest perimeter. Nobody enters or exits without permission. While I was dealing with intruders in the forest, Baron Blackpine was falling apart in his camp south of the woods. None of his people came back. Not the 4 Black Iron adventurers, not the scout teams. Then his lookout reported something worse. 25 soldiers in matching leather armor with long swords had emerged from the forest. 25 swords meant 25 trainee knights, marching in formation. That was Pega's squad escorting Jolin to see our parents. The Baron sat alone in his wrecked tent. For formal knights gone. An unknown force controlling his old territory with trainee knights as common foot soldiers. He had no idea how many real knights they had. If they sent even one squad of formal knights after him, he couldn't survive. He called his eldest son Andre and told him the truth. The territory was lost. They couldn't take it back. He gave Andre a small wooden box. Inside was a glass vial of golden liquid, a battle energy awakening potion, the family's most precious treasure. Without it, reaching formal knight rank required inherited bloodline, and the Blackpine family didn't have that lineage. He'd once prepared a full set of knight armor hidden in the castle's secret room. That was probably gone now too. Nothing left worth holding on to in Blackpine territory. He told Andre to break through to formal knight tonight using the potion, then leave before dawn for St. Laurent, the duchy capital. Get a frontier decree. Start fresh somewhere else. The Silver Moon Trading Company might have connections that could help. The Baron himself planned to approach Count Darahai about the Silver Moon family's interest in sea routes. Maybe losing everything could turn into a new opportunity. He told his son not to say goodbye, not to look back. Just go. That evening, the patrol reported back on their tracking through the forest. I told them not to worry about powerful individuals slipping through. Strong knights were rare. Armies needed roads for supply wagons and equipment. The common soldiers and servants that nobles depended on couldn't cross swamps and dense forest. More traps along the approaches would be enough to deter most attempts. Then Slave One arrived with his orc squad, bringing in 5 captured human knights. Count Darahai's men who'd been sent to investigate me through the eastern route into Black Mountain territory. I'd told Slave One to capture them alive if possible, and he'd done exactly that. The knights saw orcs kneeling before me and lost their minds. They called me a traitor to humanity, accused me of being a puppet controlled by orcs, refused to believe any orc would willingly serve a human. One screamed that every orc he'd ever fought chose death over surrender. Slave One quietly explained the truth. Orc warriors fought to the death because their families would be punished if they surrendered, enslaved, or worse. With no tribe watching, and facing a master too strong to defeat, following me was simply the only way to survive. The orc soldiers were people too. They wanted to live. The nights went quiet. Then one laughed bitterly through tears, finally understanding. I pointed out the hypocrisy. I'd already killed 4 adventurers today who came to assassinate me for a baron who had no territory to give them. Dying for an empty promise wasn't noble, it was stupid. The oldest knight shifted his tone entirely, suddenly acting friendly. He said he'd report favorably to Count Darahai about my methods for breaking orc morale. Another one started demanding food, wine, and healing potions like a guest. They'd seen my settlements and patrols along the way and clearly assumed I was a Silver Moon family operation. They figured they'd play nice now and deal with me later through the count. I wasn't interested in their games. I told Slave 1 they'd been disrespectful. He asked permission to execute them. I told him to make it quick. He drew his short knife and killed all 5, one after another. They screamed about betrayal and called me a criminal until the last one stopped moving. I drained their souls into the banner, 5 more soul beads. I rewarded Slave 1 for his excellent work and allowed him to recruit up to full battalion strength. Then I went back to my tent, sat down, and smiled. I'd sent him to handle those knights expecting some might die in the fight. Instead, he brought all 5 back alive. Impressive. Morning intelligence hit me like a punch. Baron Blackpine had given up, used his precious awakening potion on his son Andre last night, and sent him to St. Laurent for a new frontier decree. The Baron himself was heading east to chase Darahai's army and earn favor. Good, one problem gone. Alina from the Silver Moon family had heard Edwin's full report and figured out I'd intercepted most of the orc loot from near Hope City. When she heard my 1% trade tax, she immediately decided to back me as a new noble. She ordered grain and supplies shipped to Coastal Camp, plus weapons and armor for trade. But the third report made me jump out of bed barefoot. The orc chief had learned about my forest ambush and feared I'd cut off his retreat entirely. He ordered a commander named Azage to attack from Red Maple City, retake Rift Wind Fortress, then send 30 Wolf Riders to blitz Northwind City. 30 Wolf Riders, 30 Black Iron level fighters on magic wolves, probably with a Bronze Knight leading them. I had almost nobody who could face that head-on. I scrambled into armor and ordered an immediate march to Riftwind Canyon. I sent word for Bear 3 to bring 3,000 reserve troops. There were also 10,000 construction workers near the second fort who could fight if needed. As we marched, I felt souls flowing into my banner through the connection. My soldiers were dying. 10, then more. The battle at Riftwind Fortress had started. Azage's forces were closer than mine. At a rest stop, I split my forces. Luke rode ahead to pick combat-ready men from the construction crews and reinforce Bear 2 immediately. I told him to order Bear 2 to hold defensive positions. Don't fight the orc elites in the open. Use fortifications and terrain to wear them down. I sent Hermon to Creek Valley to bring every single cart crossbow. And Slave 1 took his orc battalion back to guard all possible mountain crossing points against infiltrators. By sunset, we reached the second fort. Bear 2 reported that 500 orcs had attacked Riftwind Fortress 3 times since noon. All 3 assaults were repulsed, but casualties were heavy. 2 crossbows were broken, and bolts were running low. Luke had arrived just in time with 500 construction workers turned soldiers. Without them, the evening attack would have broken through. The fortress was still ours. Barely. I told Bear 2 to prepare camp and food for Bear 3's 3,000 reserves arriving tonight. I sent George to scout Riftwind Fortress, count our people, check supplies, study the enemy positions. I gave 500 construction workers the Soul Banner's power and fed them meat porridge while we waited. George came back with his report. The original garrison had 30 survivors. Luke's reinforcements had 451 left. 5 cart crossbows, 83 bolts. The fortress was built against a cliff face, blocking the canyon exit. Walls 15 meters high, the canyon only 30 meters wide. A strong position. The enemy could only attack with small numbers at a time. Bear 2 said 3,000 orcs couldn't break through. I told him no fortress was unbreakable. I sent Morandi with the 500 fresh troops to relieve Luke at the fortress. Then I waited for Bear 3. Past midnight, he still hadn't arrived. I checked the intelligence. Bear 3 would arrive at 3 in the morning. Cart crossbows from Creek Valley needed 2 more days. And then the worst news. The orc wolf riders had already climbed to the cliff top above the fortress. They planned to rope down behind our walls while 2,000 orcs attacked from the front. A coordinated assault, inside and out. I slammed my fist on the table. I sent a rider to warn Morandi about the cliff attack. I called Bear 2 and ordered him into the canyon immediately to set up traps and obstacles, leaving only a single file path down the middle. Finished before dawn, but it was already too late for the fortress. The wolf riders fired signal arrows. The orc infantry charged from the front. When the defenders swung their crossbows toward the ground attack, the wolf riders started hurling rocks from the cliff above, a rain of stones that sent my soldiers scrambling for cover. The orcs scaled the walls with ladders while rocks pounded from above. Then the 30 wolf riders roped down the cliff into the fortress itself. Front and back, enemies everywhere. Morandi fought hard. He killed 3 orcs, covered in blood, screaming for his men to fight for the master's honor. But the gap in strength was too great. A spiked club caught him in the head before he could react. He fell and didn't get up. Half an hour later, there was nobody left standing inside Riftwind Fortress. I stood on the wall of the second fort, watching the glow of fires rolling across the eastern sky. I said nothing for a long time. Someone behind me spoke quietly. Morandi and his men died as they swore they would. They honored their oath. I stood on the wall watching the fire glow in the east and felt 500 souls flow into my banner. 500 lives gone. I told Thomas this was our first real fight against organized orc forces. Everything before, the old, the scattered, the starving, that wasn't the real enemy. This was. Bear 3 arrived exhausted after marching over 100 miles. His 4,000 troops needed rest badly. Sending them into battle now would be murder, not warfare. I gave them the soul banner's power and told him to let them eat and sleep. Meanwhile, I ordered him to pull 3,000 combat-ready troops from other positions. We need at least 3 times the enemy's numbers to hold against orc elites. Inside the fallen Riftwind Fortress, the Wolf Rider captain surveyed the damage. They'd lost nearly 300 orcs taking the fort. Almost 1 orc for every 2 of my soldiers killed. The orc officers were stunned. Human defenders usually broke and ran. These ones fought to the death. The Wolf Rider's cliff attack had been the decisive blow. Without it, orc casualties would have been far worse. They debated whether to push forward or wait. They sent 3 separate battle reports by Hawk to their commander Azage in Red Maple City. Azage smashed his table when he read the casualty numbers. But his advisor pointed out the opportunity. If they took Northwind City and the Frozen Fortress, they'd control both north-south passages. Attack and defense, both covered. Azage ordered an immediate advance. No delays. The Wolf Rider scouts reported back that Bear 2 had filled the canyon with obstacles, horse barriers, and pit traps alternating across the entire width, with only a narrow, single-file path left in the middle. The orc officers scoffed at first, but the scouts explained the problem. The dirt had been removed from the pits, and in a rocky canyon, there was no loose soil to fill them back up. Moving those barriers would take longer than fighting a battle. The Wolf Rider captain was smarter than the infantry commanders. He let the 2,000-foot soldiers go ahead to deal with the obstacles while he took his 30 riders around the back way, over the cliffs again. Let the grunts do the hard work. The orc infantry pushed into the canyon and immediately hit the wall of traps. The commanders screamed at their soldiers to start filling and clearing. The real fight for the canyon was just beginning. Bear 2's work in the canyon paid off exactly as I'd hoped. The orcs hit the first line of obstacles and ground to a halt. Horse barriers made from heavy timber, their spiked clubs bounced right off. 1 orc broke his own weapon trying. The pits weren't deep enough to kill, but deep enough to twist ankles, and there were too many to ignore. The orc commander Manlag lost his temper smashing through the first set. The Wolf Rider captain mocked his soldiers for being stupid, then ordered them to stack the broken barriers on the rock piles along the sides and push forward down the middle path. They left a few men behind to fill pits and kept moving. 300 meters of clear road, then another line of barriers and pits, then another, and another. Every 1,000 meters, the same setup. Each one took half an hour to clear. The orcs walked and stopped, all morning. By noon, they still hadn't exited the canyon. Manlag understood what was happening. We were buying time. Not running, just making them crawl when they wanted to charge. The second commander, Gilf, laughed it off and volunteered to lead the final push. His 1,000 soldiers charged forward across the last stretch of shallow pits toward a wall of wooden boards blocking the exit. They got within 100 paces. Then our cart crossbows fired through holes cut in the boards. Bolts flew flat along the ground and skewered 4 or 5 orcs at a time, stringing them together. 40 orcs dropped in the first volley. The survivors froze. Gilf screamed at them to keep charging. The crossbows were slow to reload. They rushed forward. Second volley, 30 more down. Gilf reached the boards himself and hacked them apart with his battle axe. His soldiers poured through the gap, smashing the wall down. Behind the boards, our soldiers were already pulling the cart crossbows back on ox carts, retreating deeper. The crossbow crews fumbled to reload while rolling backward. Gilf was shaking with rage. He ordered his men to chase and kill every last one. The crossbows fired again. The cart crossbows retreated slowly on ox carts, firing backward at the pursuing orcs. Each bolt skewered 4 or 5 at a time. Commander Gilf threw his battle knife and killed one of my crossbow operators, but we had another trick ready. The crews cut ropes on the cart tails and dumped bags of sharp stones across the canyon floor. The orcs, charging barefoot across rocky ground, started screaming. Twisted ankles, broken bones, faces smashed into stone. They couldn't chase anymore. It took them time to figure out they could use their hide clothing to sweep the stones aside and clear a path. By the time they got through, we'd gained more distance. They hit the stone trap, cleared it, advanced another 1,000 meters, hit another obstacle line. Again and again. Walk, stop, clear, walk, stop, clear. The whole morning burned away. They didn't exit the canyon until noon. When they finally reached the western end, my forces were waiting. A wall of spear formations blocking the exit, with more troops behind them. The Wolf Rider captain scanned for cart crossbows and didn't see any. We'd hidden them behind shield formations. He agreed to lead one charge. 30 Wolf Riders in 2 rows surged forward on their magic wolves, smashing through the 500-man spear formation in seconds. The captain's sword released green elemental energy that cut through 8 spears at once. His wolves tore through soldiers like paper. They punched clean through and turned around to slaughter from inside. I watched from horseback. 30 riders had destroyed a 500-man formation in moments. Superhuman combat power. I ordered Bear 2 to fire. The shield wall opened gaps, and the hidden crossbows unleashed. Bolts ripped through wolf riders, one through the waist, one through the shoulder, sending the rider flying, another pinning a rider's leg while his dying wolf crushed him. 7 or 8 riders fell in seconds. The captain dodged one bolt, took a graze, and charged toward the crossbows. Then I fired. 2 battle energy arrows from my longbow. One hit his chest and blew him off his mount. The other killed his wolf. He staggered up, blood pouring from his mouth, tried to dodge more bolts, and my final arrow punched through his chest. He fell and didn't move. The surviving riders scattered into the canyon. I ordered my formations forward. They crashed into the 2 orc infantry battalions. Spears against clubs, shields against axes. I picked off the strongest orcs with my bow. Commander Gilf was swinging a knight's longsword, face covered in blood, grinning, until my blue glowing arrow put a hole through his chest. He dropped dead. Commander Manlag saw the wolf riders and Gilf fall in rapid succession. He turned and ran. His soldiers followed. My troops pressed forward, cutting down stragglers. I lowered my bow. Stop the pursuit. Treat the wounded. Clean the battlefield. I stood on the battlefield and unfurled the soul banner. Blue light washed across the field like a tide, dissolving every orc body and magic wolf carcass into gray mist that streamed into the banner. My soldiers watched in stunned silence as the enemy dead turned to dust, leaving only our own fallen to be collected. 35 new soul beads. 15 first-rank magic wolves, 20 wolf riders. A massive harvest. Enough to empower over 10,000 more soldiers. Bear 2 knelt before me, covered in blood. Over 700 dead, 200 more crippled. 1,000 casualties total. I told him to make the permanently wounded into settlement leaders across the farming villages. They'd earned that much. He asked if we should retake Riftwind Fortress. I said no. The orcs feared we'd cut their retreat. Now they held the fortress, and we'd shown our strength. A stalemate served us better than more fighting. More battle would just bleed both sides dry. We needed time. Time to grow the army, time to build equipment. I ordered a wall built at this position in the canyon. Hold as long as possible. Tom was on our side. Back in Red Maple City, Commander Manlag reported the disaster to Azich. Over 1,000 orcs dead. Wolf Rider Captain Fachaga dead. Commander Gilf dead. Half the Wolf Riders gone. Only 10 riders and 15 wolves returned from 30. Azich smashed his table. He couldn't understand how a bronze knight with 30 black iron wolf riders could lose. Manlag described the crossbows. Massive machines on wooden frames that punched through multiple bodies per shot. Weapons he'd never seen before. And a human knight, at least bronze level, who shot arrows that killed with a single hit. Azij sent 500 fresh warriors to reinforce Rift Wind Fortress and ordered constant surveillance of our movements. He spared Manlag's life. The tribe still needed him. Then he sat alone and wrote a letter to the orc chief, sealed it, and sent it by hawk. He stared at the dark mountains and clenched his fists. I stood on the wall of the second fortress watching 1,000 workers build defenses in the canyon. Snow started falling, tiny flakes drifting down from a gray sky. The intelligence brought welcome news. Grand Duke Steinein's messenger was on his way with a personal letter and a silver medal to verify my identity and achievements. Edwin's first grain shipment had left the Silver Moon port, 3 days out, plus 20 skilled craftsmen and farming experts that Lady Alina had sent to help me. The orc chief, after hearing about his losses in the canyon, was worried about being cut off. With winter snow coming to block the mountain passes, he decided to end this year's war early. And I learned something crucial about the Soul Banner's power. My soldiers who received the banner's feedback were essentially blood lineage knights. They could break through to higher levels with sufficient energy alone, without needing expensive awakening potions. The only limit was that they couldn't surpass the strength of whoever the soul bead originally came from. The war was ending for the season. Snow meant rest, and rest meant time to build strength. I remembered the old saying about auspicious snow promising a good harvest. This winter, I'd show them what a sea of knights looked like. I called Bear 2 and Bear 3 up. I told them the truth. They were blood lineage knights now. With enough energy and training, they could reach black iron rank without any potion. Every soldier who'd received the banner's power was the same. That was why so many had become trainee knights so quickly. I gave my orders. Bear 2 would hold the canyon and keep building defenses. No need to fight the orc main force head-on. Just hold the line. Bear 3 would screen the fastest advancing soldiers for a new knight order. I needed superhuman fighters to match the orc wolf riders. After yesterday, it was clear, without equal-level warriors, no amount of regular soldiers could stop elite cavalry. First goal, 1 company of knights. Then another. By spring, at least a full battalion of superhuman knights. Training ground would be Coastal Camp, which I was upgrading to Coastal Town. I ordered 1,000 new recruits sent to Coastal Town every 7 days. I'd empower 10,000 more soldiers over the winter to prepare for next year's fighting. Bear 4 needed to report on iron mining in Black Mountain territory and weapon production. Sitting on an iron mine and still worrying about arms was unacceptable. I rode out into the falling snow with my escorts, heading west toward the coast. Behind me, footprints pressed into the fresh white ground, one after another, stretching into the distance. We rode through the falling snow all day and reached Coastal Town by evening. The place had grown fast, new buildings everywhere, hammering sounds even in the snowfall. I felt a twinge of guilt watching people work in the cold, but there was no choice. Winter was coming, and everything needed to be ready. Shipwright Glenn had been running things here. He'd built 20 small warehouses on the northeast hilltop, all smoke-dried and ready for grain storage. The 2 fishing boats I'd left behind had been pulling in over 10,000 gene of fish daily, with 100,000 gene stored up. But yesterday the catch dropped to almost nothing. Maybe the fish schools had migrated. Glenn was too afraid to explore further west. He'd been on a voyage years ago where ships were smashed by waves 3 days out. He'd barely survived. I officially renamed the settlement Coastal Town and put Glenn in charge of the docks and fleet until I could find a proper administrator. Next morning, the sea air felt different. My water attribute battle energy stirred strongly in the cold, wet environment. Training near the coast would be more effective. The intelligence was heavy. The orc chief had faked a full retreat. The noble coalition took the bait and chased for 20 miles before orcs ambushed them from 3 sides, devastating the army. Sigmund rushed in and saved Count Darahai, but Baron Blackpine and many smaller nobles were killed. The coalition was broken. They couldn't fight anymore. Sigmund watched the orcs march away and didn't dare pursue. Baron Blackpine was dead. I thought of my brother Jolin. At least he was free now. That was probably the best ending for everyone. Edwin was arriving tomorrow with 20 grain ships, far more than my 20 warehouses could handle. I needed at least 50 storage buildings. I told Glenn to figure out which wooden houses could serve as temporary storage and plan the unloading so nothing sat on the docks. Grand Duke Steinine's messenger would reach my southern fort tonight, escorted by a knight squad, 1 bronze knight, 3 black iron knights, 20 trainee knights. I sent Luke to prepare Bear 1 for the reception and warned him to keep defenses tight. And there was a discovery. 1 fishing boat had explored northwest and found a chain of rocky islands 30 miles past Coiling Dragon Mountain. Among the reefs lived a type of sea cucumber rich in energy. Eating large quantities could help trainee knights accumulate enough power to break through to black iron level. Exactly what I needed for the knight order I was building. I told Glenn to find out which boat had made the discovery. I was going out to sea today to see those islands myself. I stood on the ship's bow feeling the sea wind stir my battle energy. It flowed through my meridians faster than usual, like a happy stream. Water attribute energy thrived near the ocean. Glenn brought the fisherman Barnes, who'd found the reef islands. The man was terrified, thinking he'd be punished for going off course without reporting. I told him his intentions were good. He'd been trying to find more fish when the catch dropped. But next time, report everything. I ordered him to take me there now. He protested that it had just snowed. I asked if the sea had frozen. It hadn't. So we sailed. After a few hours, a cluster of dark rocks appeared above the water, the reef islands. The ship couldn't get close because of submerged rocks, so we lowered small boats. I told the crew to grab anything alive they could find. A sailor reached into the water near a rock and pulled out a wriggling red creature. He screamed and dropped it into the boat. It was a sea cucumber, bright red, covered in soft, fleshy spines. I picked it up and pushed a thread of battle energy into it. The thing thrashed so hard it nearly escaped my grip. Powerful energy inside. I handed it to my escort Bana and told him to cut it open, clean it, boil it, and eat it. This was the energy supplement that could push trainee knights to black iron rank. I told the rest of the escorts, whoever catches them, keeps them. Red sea cucumbers were the best for building blood energy, which was the biggest barrier between trainee and black iron knight. The escorts went wild. Tony jumped into a small boat. Harvey stripped off his jacket and dove straight into the sea with a net bag. One by one they all jumped in, swimming toward the red-tinged rocks. The water around the reefs was warm, heated from below, possibly by underwater volcanic activity. That explained the red color and the sea cucumbers thriving here. In 2 hours the ship's hold was half full. I called them back and said from now on, only take the big ones. Leave the small ones to grow. I assigned Barnes to harvest 2,000 per day, with a squad of trainee knights to do the actual diving. On the way back, Bana started steaming. His face turned red, veins popping, white vapor rising from his skin. The sea cucumber's energy was hitting him hard. I told him to start practicing basic combat forms immediately and channel the energy. He did 7 rounds. On the 7th, he felt a chi vortex forming in his core. It spun, almost stabilized, then collapsed when the energy ran out. He was crushed. So close. I laughed and told him that was proof the sea cucumbers worked. A few more tonight, and he'd break through to Black Iron Knight. The other escorts crowded around asking how many they needed to eat. I told them 3 each to start, more if needed. If Bana broke through tonight, they'd follow the same method. And anyone who slacked off with resources this good would get thrown in the ocean to feed the sea cucumbers. We got back to coastal town and the escorts each grabbed 3 of the fattest sea cucumbers and ran to their quarters to cook them. I watched the sailors unloading the rest, thousands of them in wooden buckets. Some had already died from the cold. Dead ones lost their invisible energy quickly, which was wasteful. That's why I'd capped the daily catch at 2,000. Take more, and they'd just go to waste. Jolin came out and jumped back when he saw the wriggling red creatures. He suggested calling them red blood ginseng instead of sea cucumbers, better name for selling. I told him we weren't selling these. If anyone found out we had something that could rapidly build blood energy for knight advancement, we'd have every noble in the duchy at our door. Keep quiet and profit in secret. Luke arrived with the guard unit, and I gave him all the remaining buckets, every last one. He and the guards would eat as much as they could. Jolin watched in disbelief as bucket after bucket left the room. I told him not to be like Baron Blackpine, so stingy with resources that he never developed a single superhuman fighter among his men. When trouble came, the Baron had nobody who could save him. Then I told Jolin the news. Baron Blackpine was dead, killed in the orc ambush on the Noble Coalition near Hope City. His people were all farmers with no real combat ability. When the orcs struck, nobody came back for him. Jolin went pale. I reminded him gently. The Baron had given him exactly one potion in years of loyal service, and only because he'd earned it with blood. That was the kind of master Blackpine had been. We talked about my plans. I was building a company of Black Iron Knights first, then expanding to a full battalion by spring. Jolin couldn't believe the scale. Even Viscount Northwind hadn't maintained that many superhuman fighters. He asked how I knew about events hundreds of miles away. I told him the world had more paths to power than just the Knight's Way. And when you were strong enough, information came to you. People sought out the powerful for protection. That was the nature of power. I told him about my orc soldiers, over 1,000, living and working alongside humans peacefully. He stared at me like I was a stranger. He asked what else he didn't know. I laughed and said there was too much to cover. But the important thing was this: someday I'd leave this territory behind. The world was too big to stay in one small corner. I wanted to plant my Morningstar banner on every peak, explore every land. I hadn't even seen St. Laurent yet. When that day came, everything here would be his to manage. Count Jolin, Marquis Jolin, Duke Jolin. His only job right now was getting stronger, so he'd be ready. He grabbed my arm and said the territory should go to my children, not him. I shook my head. I wanted to see the whole world. He admitted he'd never seen St. Laurent either. We looked at each other and burst out laughing. That evening at dinner, Jolin tried his first red blood ginseng and devoured it instantly. Mother refused to touch the spiny things. Jolin bolted outside mid-meal when the warmth hit his stomach and started punching through combat forms in the snow. Mother panicked, thinking the food had poisoned him. Then Bana stopped moving in the corner of the yard. His body trembled. Then he threw his head back laughing. He'd broken through, Black Iron Knight. He knelt in the snow before me, crying with joy. The first of my escorts to reach formal knight rank. I watched everyone else train. Half an hour later, Thomas reported the results. 5 escorts and 6 guards had become Black Iron Knights. 11 new formal knights in one evening. The remaining 5 escorts had reached late trainee knight stage and would likely break through tomorrow. Over 30 guards hit late stage too. Within days, we'd have over 100 Black Iron Knights. Jolin was speechless. Baron Blackpine hadn't had a single trainee knight in his entire service. I'd made 11 formal knights in one night. I warned him not to underestimate the old noble families, though. They had 1,000 years of accumulated power. Our strength was still a drop in the ocean compared to theirs. He asked if he could eat more tomorrow. I laughed and told him to help himself. Just eat small amounts frequently so he didn't burst. Next morning, I woke to find half a foot of snow piled outside my door. The roads were buried. Carts couldn't move. Supply lines to the farming settlements would break if I didn't solve the transport problem fast. Intelligence updates. The Duke's messenger had arrived at the southern fort last night. They'd noticed Bear 1 was only early Black Iron level and got cocky, wandering around freely, until they saw trainee knights everywhere they looked. Their attitude shifted from contempt to caution. They were heading to coastal town today. Edwin's fleet would arrive at noon with 20 grain ships and 20 specialists, including a first-rank druid named Cedric who specialized in farming and crop cultivation. And the Reef Islands had a volcanic center. The fire energy had transformed regular sea cucumbers into semi-magical creatures over generations. Near the volcanic vent lived over 200 first-rank red blood ginseng that could accelerate advancement all the way to Silver Knight level. That was my own advancement path. I called the carpenters and showed them how to build a sled, 2 long runners, 3 crossbars, lashed together with rope. No wheels needed. An old carpenter was baffled until he dragged it across the snow and it glided effortlessly. One person could pull a loaded sled that would stop a wheeled cart dead. I ordered mass production immediately. We needed them today. Then I sent the 5 escorts who hadn't broken through yet to harvest red blood ginseng for 5 days as punishment. They'd get plenty of chances to eat their fill while diving. I took a small boat into the reef islands alone to find the first-rank red blood ginseng near the volcanic vent. The water bubbled with heat. I searched the crevices between rocks and found them, but they were only finger-sized. When I reached for the first one, it shot a blast of scalding water at my face. I barely dodged. The spray hit the water behind me and turned to steam instantly. These tiny things were first-rank magic beasts. One shot each. Then they went limp, pathetically weak. But that hot water could burn your face off if you weren't careful. I grabbed a shield from my soul weapon space and started hunting systematically. They liked fast-flowing water between rock cracks. Each one I caught fired at me as I snatched it into my soul weapon's living space. After an hour, my shield had 3 scorched pits from the ones that got the jump on me. Over 200 of them scattered across a huge area, each one finger-sized and hiding in crevices. Too many to catch in one trip. I'd come back later. Back at the dock, Edwin had arrived with 20 ships full of grain. Jolin and Glan were directing the unloading. Edwin greeted me with his usual dramatic warmth. I offered him a farming settlement of his own. He nearly choked trying to figure out if I was joking. All 20 ships were grain, no other goods. But Lady Alina had sent 20 skilled workers, craftsmen, and farming specialists. Edwin assured me the Silver Moon family was fully committed to backing me now. Supplies wouldn't be a problem. I tested that claim immediately. I told him I needed 2,000 warhorses and 2,000 sets of formal knight equipment. He almost died coughing. A single set of knight armor cost hundreds of gold coins. 2,000 sets would be nearly 1,000,000 gold coins total, and the entire duchy didn't have that many in stock. Armor was handmade, took generations to accumulate, and families passed it down through repairs. I settled for leather armor instead. He was shocked that I planned to equip every soldier myself. Normally, nobles required their knights and conscripts to provide their own weapons and armor. Only personal bodyguards got fully equipped by their lord. I was trying to outfit thousands. He'd brought 3 blacksmiths who could forge knight swords, but only one who could make armor. Most of the 20 workers were free citizens who'd accepted the Silver Moon family's promises to come north. One blacksmith had sold himself into slavery after family troubles. I noticed Edwin staring at the sleds zipping around on the snow. He immediately saw the business potential. Sell them to northern nobles. I told him we'd talk about it later. The Duke's messenger had entered Black Pine Forest, but the deep snow would slow them down badly. They wouldn't arrive tonight. Good. Let them struggle through the snow for a while. That way they'd understand. The master of this territory wasn't easy to reach. While I was at the Reef Islands and entertaining Edwin, the Duke's messenger Hermann was stuck at my second camp in the forest, snowbound. His horse-drawn carriage couldn't handle the deep snow, so he'd stopped for the night. Then my supply sleds arrived. 5 trainee knights pulling a loaded sled each, having run 60 miles from coastal town since noon. Hermann was stunned. His carriage could barely manage 15 miles in a day through snow, and my soldiers were sprinting 60 like it was exercise. He stopped one of my men and asked how they planned to break through to formal knight rank without awakening potions. The soldier looked at him like he was stupid and said, "Eat well and train hard." "What else?" Hermann's smile froze. Back in his quarters, Hermann explained to his escort what this meant. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were blood lineage knights. Blood lineage meant their bodies were fundamentally changed, allowing natural breakthroughs without expensive potions. Only powerful, ancient families could create blood lineage knights. The great noble houses of the duchy each had secret blood knight orders, but they kept them hidden. Someone displaying this many blood lineage knights openly was either a fool or someone backed by a force too powerful to challenge. The Duke's bronze medal and baron title might actually be insulting to whoever controlled this territory. Hermann told his men to sleep. Tomorrow they'd meet the Morningstar Baron and maybe get answers. I didn't know any of this was happening. The messenger had scared himself with his own assumptions before even meeting me. Invisible intimidation was the most effective kind. I spent the evening drinking with Edwin. We struck the deal firmly. Silver Moon ships would pass toll-free, 1% trade tax, no exceptions, forever. He could ship my exports south too. Timber, or furs, fish. I asked about the 2,000 sets of knight armor again. He choked on his wine. Late-night intelligence told me the red blood ginseng contained fire toxin and needed 3 hours of slow cooking before eating, no raw consumption. The messenger had concluded my soldiers were blood lineage knights and might recommend a higher title for me back in St. Laurent. The war had officially ended due to heavy snow. Sigmund was marching home, and the orc chief had personally inspected the captured cart crossbows at Riftwind Fortress. He'd stared at them for a long time, impressed that human craftsmanship could compensate for weaker physical strength. He ordered them shipped to Red Maple City for study and imitation. Blood lineage knights. I smiled. The messenger had frightened himself before we'd even met. That saved me the trouble of explaining anything. I woke before dawn and cooked 2 first-rank red blood ginseng in my helmet pot over the fire, simmering them for hours while I slept. By morning the broth was milky white, and the sea cucumbers were glossy dark red. I ate both in 2 bites. The heat rushed through my body like warm water, flooding every muscle and bone. Then the energy flowed back through my meridians into the battle energy seed in my core. I felt it grow, just slightly, and noticed something new. My seed had always been blue, water attribute. Now a thread of fire red appeared on its surface. Water and fire, yin and yang, feeding each other. The ancient principle of opposing elements creating growth actually worked here. I ran through the basic combat forms to process the remaining heat, my fists cutting the air with real force. Bana reported the overnight results. All 10 escorts had become Black Iron Knights. 34 guards broke through overnight. I told them the Duke's messenger would arrive today, make sure nobody looked weak. Meanwhile, Hermann and his escort were racing toward coastal town on my sleds, which they'd borrowed from my supply runners. Hermann actually enjoyed it, laughing as snow sprayed in his face. They passed through my checkpoints without delay. I'd already notified the camps to let them through. As they rode west, they noticed the farming settlements, one every 4 or 5 miles, stretching endlessly. Hermann understood what it meant. If these settlements covered the whole territory at that density, the population was enormous. The rumors about me intercepting the orc convoy's slaves and loot were clearly true. When they finally reached coastal town, 11 guards stood at the entrance. Hermann studied them and realized every single one was a Black Iron Knight. 11 formal knights guarding a gate. In the entire duchy, only the Grand Duke's palace had that kind of security. He was now completely convinced there was a massive power backing me. He announced himself as Grand Duke Steinin's messenger, here to verify my achievements and calculate merit for promotion. My squad leader checked his noble crest, tossed it back casually, and told him to behave himself and not cause trouble. Hermann took no offense. The dismissive attitude only reinforced his belief that he was dealing with something far above his station. He told his entire escort to dismount. They would walk into coastal town on foot, leading their horses behind them. A gesture of respect. Bana spotted the messenger's party entering the town and brought Hermann to me. I walked out with a smile to greet him. He was clearly surprised by how young I was. We sat down to eat. He handed me a letter from Grand Duke Steinin asking me to cooperate with Sigmund's army and attack the orcs from the north. I set the letter aside without reading it and told him the war was over for the season. No point moving in winter. He pushed further. The orc retreat was temporary. Come spring, the Northwind Fortress ice would melt and orcs could attack from multiple directions. The Duke wanted me to at least hold my territory and, if possible, coordinate to retake lost ground. He offered terms. I guard Riftwind Canyon and push north past the fortress if I could. Each side provides its own supplies. Keep whatever you capture. If I recovered all 4 northern baronies, the Duke would grant me a viscounty after the war. I read the letter carefully while thinking about the geography. The orcs' main route south was through Northwind Fortress. Everyone knew that. Red Maple County fell because nobody expected the orcs to come from a different direction. Next year, the orcs would focus on the fortress to secure their rear. If I pushed north past it, I'd draw too much orc attention to myself. But holding the fortress and the canyon was in my own interest anyway. I agreed. Hermann noticed the wine was Silver Moon family's Moonlight Brew and started probing about my connections. I let him figure out it came from the Silver Moon Trading Company without confirming anything directly. He asked to tour Northwind Fortress and the Canyon Battlefield. I agreed and assigned Luke as his guide. Then he asked the real question. How did I have so many superhuman knights? I leaned back and smiled. I asked him if he thought the knight's path was the only road to supernatural power. His hand froze on his wine cup. His eyes widened. You know about that? Which academy are you from? I didn't answer. I just sipped my wine. Let him fill in the blanks himself. He was already convinced I was backed by something powerful and mysterious. No need to correct him. I told him what mattered wasn't where I came from. What mattered was that I could hold this territory, cooperate with the Duke's forces, and stop the orcs in spring. My origins had nothing to do with the duchy's interests. He nodded slowly. You're right. I asked too much. We raised our cups and drank. The next few days were quiet and productive. I ate red blood ginseng daily, trained, and handled territory business. Over 100 guards in the escort company became Black Iron Knights. The rest reached peak trainee knight level, just one step away. My intelligence told me Hermann had toured North Wind City and the Canyon Fortress. He was satisfied that I could defend this territory. He decided to leave today, but his escort Captain Hans and his knights had secretly drawn maps of my defenses, troop positions, patrol schedules, fortification layouts. Luke had noticed them doing it, but didn't stop them. Bear 3 heard that Luke had become a Black Iron Knight and got motivated. He handpicked 125 soldiers at mid-trainee knight level from various posts and was personally bringing them to Coastal Town for breakthrough training. Another 1,000 reserve troops from the construction corps were also marching here. My own cultivation was progressing. Days of eating first-rank red blood ginseng had nurtured my battle energy seed. Today, a red fire attribute pattern crystallized on its surface, shining alongside the original blue water pattern. Water and fire, 2 elements feeding each other. I wasn't sure what level this put me at mid-bronze. I had no teacher, no manual for this stage. I was figuring it out by feel. If I needed all 5 elements eventually, where would I find wood, earth, and metal sources? I assigned Gland to expand the fishing fleet's exploration range and map the surrounding seas. Every island, every resource, near and far. I asked about his family. He had none. I told him I'd arrange a wife for him. He needed to leave descendants. He broke down crying and kowtowed. Hermann departed without coming back to say goodbye. Said he didn't want to waste another day and would bring gifts next time. He scolded Hans harshly on the road for drawing those maps. He told the escort knights they were fools. If I divided my forces to watch my back because of their spying, and the orcs broke through because of it, they'd be responsible for losing the entire north. He ordered them to join Darahai's battered coalition army at Hope City and remove themselves from the area near my territory. Only then could I fight the orcs with full strength. The north needed me. The duchy needed me. Their petty scheming was worthless against real power. Then he softened slightly, told them next time, memorize things instead of writing them down. He walked away claiming he knew nothing about any maps. Luke, meanwhile, circled back to the 3rd camp after seeing them off. He checked that all 25 people and horses passed through intact, then ordered the camp to verify the count at the next checkpoint. If anyone had split off to spy, he wanted to know immediately. Satisfied, he rode back to report to me. Over the past month, things had gone smoothly. I expanded the army by over 10,000 and trained 5 companies of Black Iron Knights, while eating red blood ginseng daily and handling territory business. Then one morning at breakfast, a piece of intelligence made me freeze mid-bite. I set my bread down and walked out, leaving my family confused. For reports, the orc chief had sent shamans to check the frozen fortress. Once the ice melted, they'd attack again. Azage and Red Maple City had 5,000 soldiers and 10,000 slave laborers ready, training day and night. Grand Duke Steinine was furious the orcs were already preparing for war in winter and ordered Sigmund to take 20,000 soldiers north in spring with the noble coalition. But the 4th report changed everything. A magic tide was rising. Elemental energy across the world was slowly increasing. Near the volcanic center of my reef islands, a fire spirit had been born. It was a piece of earth-fire stone, forged by underground flames over millions of years, that had floated to the surface of the magma. The magic tide awakened its consciousness, turning it into a living fire elemental. It was trapped between rising lava and crushing seawater, struggling to survive. The intelligence said a druid could form a contract with it, or my soul weapon could imprison it in the living space. Magic tide meant magic beasts would grow stronger, mages would emerge from their academies, and more people could become knights through training alone. One ice scroll had frozen an entire fortress. What could a fire spirit do? I didn't know, but I couldn't let anyone else have it. The druid that Alina had sent was hiding from me. Fine, let him hide. I'd capture this spirit myself. I sailed to the reef islands and rowed my small boat toward the volcanic vent. The water was boiling near the center, lava bubbling up and getting pushed back by seawater in an endless cycle. I jumped in, stored my boat, and climbed across cooled lava rocks toward the vent. First, I prepared a home for the spirit. I pried up cooled lava chunks and built a fire pit inside my soul weapon's living space, stacking wood beside it. I scooped molten lava with an iron shovel and poured it into the fire pit. The shovel melted. I switched to an iron probe and stirred the magma. A flame shot up from the lava, and at its tip were two tiny eyes staring at me. I told it the volcano was below sea level and would eventually be swallowed by the ocean. Come with me. I'll give you a new home. It responded by blasting a fire column at my face. I dove into the water to dodge. Feisty little thing. I looked more carefully and spotted a black stone beneath the lava. The earth fire stone, the spirit's physical body. I scooped it up with my shovel. The instant the stone left the magma, the fire spirit leaped onto it, engulfed the shovel head in flame, and started crawling up the handle toward me. I smiled and pulled everything, shovel, stone, spirit, into my soul weapon's living space, dropping it all into the prepared fire pit. Make yourself at home. I searched the magma for more, but found nothing else. I collected a few first-rank red blood ginseng nearby, but they were getting harder and harder to find. The supply was running thin. I rowed back to the ship. On the way back, I felt energy flowing from my soul weapon into my consciousness, a warm thread connecting me to the fire spirit. By the time we docked, a red glow flickered behind my eyes. I went straight to my room and told everyone to leave me alone. No visitors, no meals. I lay down and sank into my soul weapon space. The fire spirit was weak, its flame dimmed, its tiny eyes half closed. It was starving. I redirected the fire attribute energy floating in the soul weapon space toward it. The flame jumped back to life. Then I felt the connection between us solidify. My soul weapon's alchemical arrays were binding it, not through a contract like a druid would make, but through direct refinement. Part of its essence was being extracted and fed back to me. The spirit's voice echoed in my mind, childlike, desperate, master, hungry, hungry. I dropped a pile of wood into the fire pit. The little thing pounced on it, dancing through the timber, devouring it happily. I left it eating and passed out immediately from exhaustion. Next morning, I woke shivering, annoyed by the cold in a way I'd never felt before. Something had changed inside me. The intelligence explained it. The refinement process had infused my soul with fire essence, granting me 3 abilities: flame devouring. I could eat fire to replenish fire energy. Small fireball. I could condense and launch fire projectiles. And fire immunity. Ordinary flames couldn't hurt me, and low-level fire magic was half as effective against me. But 3 of 4 intelligence reports were about orcs. Their chief Quilluin had decided to attack Rift Wind Canyon before spring, fearing a multi-directional human assault once winter ended. He'd whipped 10 slaves to death while making up his mind. His shamans had drained blood from 5 magic wolves and mixed it with herbs and magic crystal powder to create beast transformation potions. 100-strong orcs would drink them and turn into werewolves, speed, strength, and healing all massively enhanced, equivalent to peak Black Iron fighters. Tonight, these werewolves would climb the stone wall at the canyon exit under cover of darkness. 2,000 regular orc soldiers would follow to exploit the breach and take the second fortress, opening the road to Northwind City. I'd hoped for 3 months of peace. I'd gotten barely 1. I grabbed bread from the breakfast table, told Jolin to keep training the knights, and whip anyone who slacked off. He grabbed my arm and asked why he still couldn't break through to Black Iron when over 500 others already had, despite eating more red blood ginseng than anyone. I told him the harder the breakthrough, the stronger the foundation. He was our family's real talent. He didn't fully believe me. I rode out with 500 men, 3 night companies and an escort company, all Black Iron level, heading for Riftwind Canyon at full speed.